All right, let me put my game face on here. Switch over to my main little screen that I made for this. Ta-da! Ta-da! We're here. Yeah, welcome to We Grow Together. This is, long story short, this is something I've been either talked about doing, or rather I've been wanting to do for quite some time. Most of it was just me not having confidence in myself, which is just normal, but for this specifically, I maybe had even less confidence. In terms of just like what I wanted to do with this. I've always wanted to do more political, I guess, content, but I just wasn't sure how I wanted to do it, how frequently I wanted to do it. I didn't want to do something that everyone else is doing in the political, I guess, Twitch sphere. I enjoy watching political Twitch streams and whatnot, but I'm like, I don't really want to do that. I feel like I'll never, even if I was confident, I don't think I could still do it as good as a lot of these other people can do that stuff. And I mean like the, keeping up with current events and whatnot, or watching, or making long video essays and whatnot. One, I don't have the time to do that, and two, I just don't think I'd be the best at that. So yeah, this is more of a, I wanted to look at this from more of a, not me telling you too much, like, here's how you should think, here's how you should be an anti-capitalist or whatever. I wanted this to be more of a kind of series where I'm hoping I'm learning stuff from it. I'm hoping, there's some good dialogue and chat about it. And maybe you learn something from this in some capacity. Basically, it's more of a collective educational experience of some sort. But it's also fun and not so dry. Because that's my other fear, is that this will be like super dry and boring. So I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping that it's a kind of just fun learning experience. It's not something that it's not a podcast or whatnot that we're talking together and just learning things. Yeah, how's everyone doing? Feel free to drop in the chat how you're doing. Happy Saturday. It is 10:14 a.m. for me here in so-called Colorado. It's a nice day out. Finally getting some nice weather. It's been kind of crappy the last 4 months. The winter's been really, really tough here. Yeah, let me know in chat how you're doing. Trying to think what I wanted to talk about next. 'Cause that's the thing, is I have a loose kind of structured thing to this. I have a Word document with some notes and some things I wanted to cover. We're basically going to jump into a bunch of little different things in terms of, I guess, source material. We're going to have some reading, which I'm... Some people like that shit. I am not... I mean, I like reading. I like reading to myself in my own head. But I'm going to try my best to read aloud, and we're going to discuss some things, some articles I found. We're going to be looking at some videos that I found. And also, we also have... I have a little section that I'm calling good news, where it's, since everything in the world seems to suck a lot, it can be very depressing. I found some either just good news things or just fun things that maybe you'll get a laugh out of just some things that have happened recently-ish in the last couple weeks. That maybe it'll make your day a little bit better. Yeah, so that's kind of the general structure. And I did decide to kind of have each session or episode, whatever you want to call it, be around a certain subject. I only have 3 kind of sessions planned out. This is going to be kind of the trial run to see if I really want to do this. So this might be the only this might be one of only possibly 3 episodes. We'll see. I hope not. I hope that I really like this and you all really like it, and then we can keep doing it. So right now, like, I have a couple different subjects that are a bit broader to start with, and then maybe we can jump into more specific things, maybe even events of some sort, like the Paris Commune or something down the line. So yeah, if you see the stream title, it says Socialism. That's what we're going to be talking about today for the most part. Doesn't mean that I'm not opposed to the conversation maybe going in a couple directions, but for the most part I want to kind of center it around like the word socialism, like what it means, like what historically what it means, like what does it mean to other people, because I think it kind of means something a little different to every leftist, and of course it means something different, I feel like, to every conservative. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking for today. But before we get into that, and sorry for this longer introduction, I think in future episodes this will be a lot shorter. I'm just trying to go with the natural feel of things right now. Yeah, so I want to preface with saying, and going back to this being like an educational experience, not just for the chat, but for me as well, that there's some rules. The normal Twitch rules are here. This is my normal rules. Or it should pop up, hopefully. Maybe Nightbot will ignore me. Nightbot's been broken lately. Whatever. Nightbot's being weird. But yeah, so it's my normal Twitch rules, which you can find if you scroll below the Twitch feed. You know, basic stuff that most streamers have, you know. Don't be toxic, you know. Assume good faith. Read the room. If you come in here and I don't know who you are and you start making jokes about, I don't know, someone else in chat, you're probably not going to be here very long, you know? It's reading the room. It's context is important. All those things. But always assume good faith. Don't try to assume they're coming from people are coming from a negative spot, especially when it comes to politics and whatnot. Obviously, I don't give a fuck about fascism and conservatism, really. I don't really take anything they say seriously, just because of most of the time they're not, they aren't aware of the actual definitions and things that go into leftism and whatnot. And it just goes back to debate culture where it's like, you're just trying to make the other person look stupid, and I'm just not going to do that. So that's, well, I guess I'll say that is that at least this show is going to be people who are at least interested in anti-capitalist things, specifically more on the anarchist lens. So if that isn't for you and you're coming in here with the idea of, I'm going to debate Devin or I'm going to debate Chatters into convincing that capitalism is good, this is not what we're going to do here. All right, that I think part of our mind is made up. So, yeah. But I did write like a little blurb here. I guess I'm just going to read it out verbatim. So yeah, my Twitch rules still apply to We Grow Together. But additionally for the series, emphasize treating comrades with respect. That's people in chat. We're all at different spots in our political journey, and there could be more than one answer to a question. For example, how do we get rid of capitalism? That's a big loaded question, and both people can be right. I could say, we need this to be done. Someone else can say, this needs to be done, and we both can be right. So have that nuance to understand that not everything's black and white. Assume the benefit of the doubt and have trust. Kind of mentioned this earlier. You know, have trust that people are coming from good faith, and that when people ask questions, you know, treat them with respect to, you know, try your best to answer it, or I'll try my best to answer it. But that also goes with the fact that, like, not everyone's an expert, so I might not be confident enough to say an answer to a question, or I'll give my best shot at it, and just don't take my answer as God. You know, this is the correct way of thinking about it. But yeah, like I have a note here that says this chat isn't for rigid radicalism. So, and what that means, that's something actually I learned probably in the last couple weeks, because I've been reading this book. I brought a prop. This book, called Joyful Militancy, Building Thriving Resistance in Toxic Times by Nick Montgomery and Carla Bergman. Really good book. It's kind of shortish, but like, one, I have a low attention span, and the other thing is that every page I feel like is amazing. So I can only get like through like 5 to 7 pages at a time before I need to take a break. But it's really good, and they have a little section here about rigid radicalism, which is the idea that, like, you know, it's something that's kind of isn't necessarily a belief, but it's something where a lot of people in politics fall into, which is it's, you know, my opinion is the right opinion. This is the correct way of things, and it just becomes just super toxic that way, and it's not. It's just yeah, it's a whole thing. Like I said, come in with this with a kind of openish mind and understand that we're all learning together, you know? Hence, we grow together. There's the title. Also, no calls for violence or threats. I feel like this is pretty obvious, but even if you're joking about it, just no, don't. Because especially when we're talking about this kind of stuff, you can get in trouble for it. I'm not even like doing hyperbole like that. There's people who've gotten in trouble for even just joking about I'm talking about like federal crimes. So don't be calling for violence or threats. You know, if I'm talking about Jeff Bezos, don't be like, you know, I hope Jeff Bezos dies. Just don't, come on, don't do that shit. So but I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, if you have any questions about that or need clarification, feel free to type in chat and I will try my best to answer it. But yeah, let's jump in here. We're already about 13-ish minutes in here. But let's go to this slide. Ooh, fancy. Look at that. Looks like spray paint kinda on wood. But yeah, socialism. What is socialism? That is the question that I think especially in the last, I feel like, just 10 years has been asked on a national wide level here in the United States, especially with you know, Bernie Sanders running twice. You have it used in a derogatory sense. You have it used in a like clout sense. You know, people calling themselves socialists. You might have heard democratic socialists, social democrats, libertarian socialism. Sometimes you hear socialism and communism used interchangeably. And you know, there is, I think, historical definitions to it and whatnot. And there's also like my own kind of definition. I'll share that in a bit. But I'm curious, you know, feel free to drop in chat. Like, what does socialism mean to you? Whether it's in a couple words or maybe like bolded points, or if you want to give me a paragraph, that works too. Like, what is socialism to you? I'm curious. You know, there's no wrong answers with this, like I said. So drop in the chat. Like, what does socialism mean to you? And I might read it out. We might talk about it. Because I have some opinions on it. I think I'm not saying there's a right definition, like I said, but there's ones I think are closer to wrong than correct, if that makes sense. Especially, like I said, going back to United States and like what our political theater has been the last several years, especially on a electoral sense. Let me see here. Actually, let me get this up, because I have I pulled some websites here that are talking about the definition of socialism, and I went to Wikipedia, everyone's favorite source. I went to even the Webster Dictionary, and then I have a really fun one. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes in case anyone wants to drop in chat what socialism means to them. What is socialism by your own definition? Like I said, it could be bulleted points. It could be one sentence, a couple sentences, a paragraph. So I'm really curious to see what people, and like I said, there's no really wrong answers. All right, U-Ball, aka my mom, asks, resources of government helping our community and population as a whole equally. Interesting. Yeah, that's I think that's especially I think in the United States, a lot of people think of, socialism as the sense that the government is providing some sort of services and resources, like you said, to its populace, right? So, like, for example, firefighters. I know during Bernie Sanders' second run, a lot of people were being like, "Oh, if you hate socialism, it means you hate firefighters, and you hate roads." And I will say, I think that is, I get why people have that opinion, and I think it comes from more of a right wing talking point, because they don't like big government, right? So when they use this word socialism to describe big government, because, and we'll go into that with like the how during the Cold War, communism, socialism kind of used interchangeably, especially in the United States, to make sure that you're on Team USA and you're not on Team USSR, right? Anyone else have any socialism definitions before we get into some of these not random, but I guess random sites? I'll say, I guess I can go to like what my definition is, because I kind of have a socialism. I think is both it's an economic thing, and also to me, like, to a degree, like a almost like spiritual thing to a degree. I might not be cool with everyone, but to me, it's kind of like both a feeling and a economic system, political system, right? So for me, like, socialism, and we'll look at these definitions in a second here, is, to me, is like the working class having total control over the means of production. So, for example, if there's a McDonald's, right? All the workers at McDonald's actually own not just the McDonald's, but owns the meat of production to, like, make the beef patties, make the fries. So maybe McDonald's isn't the best example, but usually, like, the term means of production was because when this was first talked about, right, during the Karl Marx eras, right? So this is 1880s, 1800s, late 1800s. Factories were everywhere, pretty much, with the Industrial Revolution. You still had your jobs in, like, farming and whatnot. And I'm sure there was, jobs you could do. You're working at a grocery store or something. But for there are a lot of people worked at factories for, whether it was car factories or whatever. The idea, like, of like owning the means of production is in the sense of, controlling how the cars are made, the tools that are used to make the cars, how often you're making the cars, and maybe if you don't want to make cars anymore, having the freedom to be like, no, we're actually making bicycles now. But to a degree too, I also think socialism is stemming more than just because when I think of means of production too, like, for me, working, going to our jobs and whatnot is so connected to our life. It affects everything in our lives. Everything revolves around our jobs and going to work. That controlling over the means of production would also control over the means of the rest of our life to a degree, right? Because if we control over the means of production, we can decide, like, hey, we don't have to come into work 5 days a week. Maybe we only need to come in 3. And maybe we only need to do this set of hours, right? So we start getting in that conversation. And I'm not going to go down too deep into that rabbit hole, but it's like kind of what socialism means to me on like a more economic and societal front. But also to me, it's like more of a spiritual thing in the sense that socialism, socialism to me is also like a belief in like freedom, and then belief in your community, your neighbor, and a belief to make us better as humans and stop domination, stop, fascism, stop all the hierarchies. But this is where I get into my anarchism side of me, and how I tie that in into my socialist beliefs. But yeah, it's like this sense of unity almost that isn't, about a American flag or borders. It's more about your actual community that you're next to every single day. So unionization-esque, yeah, I mean, like, I think a lot of people will also equate unionization with, like, unionization could lead to socialism because the, workers are unionizing, they're collaborating together to fight their bosses, right? Or to fight for a better wage, better healthcare, better working hours, better working conditions. So to a degree, I wouldn't say it is socialism doing the socialism, but there is an argument to be made. I think that unionization could lead to workers becoming more aware of that they have the power to possibly control the means of production. They're the ones who do the job. And that's why when you go on strike, it stops everything. Is because they're stopping the means of production, right? They're stopping the ability to create things for the boss, because the boss isn't going to create the cars, right? But the thing is, I think with socialism that going back to means of production, that means that probably there isn't going to be bosses, because the boss is the guy who sits in the office upstairs and watches you and makes sure that you're working, working your hours correctly, you're hitting your X number of product that you're creating. So to me, like, socialism also, like I said, going against hierarchies, but even on just a base level, there is no bosses, right? It's a communal thing, hence communism. It's a communal thing of we're deciding how many cars to make, because a lot of times too, not a lot, majority, if not 99.9% of the time, under capitalism, they're just making product to make product so it can get sold, and they don't care if they over-make product. You saw that with recently with what was it called? The little, they're not bobbleheads, but the little toys there, the nerd toys with the big head and the small body, and they make all the different pop culture things. Funko Pops. That they threw away like 1 million of them, and people were like, "That's crazy." And it's like, that happens with clothes, that happens with cars, that happens with food. Food is probably the biggest one. If you ever worked at a grocery store, you know this, that like even just the dairy section, how much yogurt gets thrown away because it's past its due date because it doesn't sell. But it's all about just putting as much stock on the shelf, and then whatever doesn't get sold, we just chuck it. A lot of perishable foods like that, or not unperishable foods like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's like somewhat the whole systemic thing, but yeah, unionization, I think to a degree can help push for socialism, but even with like right now, or like unionizations and striking's up significantly since I think the 80s in the United States, you don't have it's not like people are, after they get unionized, they get what they want, and then that's kind of it. They're not pushing for the next thing, which is, hey, I want to control what work I'm doing. I want to be the ones that decide what I do. Most people are striking, for just sick time, like the all the train companies. A lot of the unions are fighting for better sick time, which is still great, right? If we're gonna live under capitalism, we gotta try our best to get what we can from the capitalists. So we'll take it, but it's not, to me, socialism, because like I said, it's not they're not controlling the trains in the sense that they're the ones deciding where the train goes, what time it goes. They're not the ones, creating the trains, how many trains we need to be made, all that stuff. But let's jump into the definitions that are online, and we can discuss them. So, boom. So this is Merriam-Webster, established in 1828. Socialism, noun. What, play it?
Socialism.
Socialism. So, 1. Any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. This goes back to what you were saying, U-Ball, with, governmental ownership, or government maybe giving back or helping the community and population as a whole. I think a lot of this stems from a lot of the state socialist countries, like Cuba, China, Vietnam. I have my opinions on that, but I'm just that's what they call themselves. If anything, they call themselves communists. But countries like Cuba had a revolution. They call themselves socialists. If anything, I like Cuba out of all of the countries there. I'm also, once again, I'm an anarchist, so I just don't like the government. I don't trust that, a president is going to tell me what's best for me. I digress. But yeah, so this definition of the governmental ownership section here, I think it stemmed from the 20th century, the 20th century of the USSR Cold War, where USSR did own all the means of production and distribution of goods. They decided what their country needs, what their people needed. 2. A system of society or group living where there's no private property. This also stems back to kind of more of a societal kind of definition there, where if you own the means of production, right, usually all these factories are private industries, right? It's not the government owning it. So when they say, I've heard both, where no private property means we're just factories for your for bosses and billionaires don't exist, right? It's all public. I've heard that. Private property, I've heard means anything but your house and your car is public. No one can come into your house and be like, this is my property. But everything else, from a hospital to the grocery store, is all public property, or rather a communal property. I shouldn't even say public, because public kind of sounds like the government's involved. So that's kind of where this comes from. System or condition of society in which the means of production are owned and controlled by the state. Once again, going back to governmental ownership, and I think tying into the 20th century with that. 3. A stage of society, Marxist theory. Karl Marx there. Marxist theory, transitional between capitalism and communism, and distinguished by unequal distribution of goods and a pay according to the work done. So this, and I could be wrong, comes more from Vladimir Lenin, in the sense that he kind of describes socialism as it goes from capitalism, socialism to communism. And that was more of a transitional state. If I remember correctly, Marx himself used socialism and communism interchangeably. If anything, we can read here. Like I said, this is also Merriam-Webster, which I believe is an English company. So like I said, don't put so much stock in this, but it's just interesting to see the definition differences, and especially when it comes to the Western world, which was very much, or still to a degree, is anti-socialist, anti-communist. And I have one here that is straight up just, to me, propaganda levels of what their definitions are. Many years since socialism entered English, around 1830, right when this dictionary was made, it has acquired several different meanings. It refers to a system of social organization in which private property and distribution of income are subject to social control, but the conception of the control has varied, and the term has been interpreted in widely diverging ways, ranging from statist to libertarian, from Marxist to liberal. In the modern era, pure socialism has been seen only rarely and used briefly in a few communist regimes. Far more common are systems of social democracy, now often referred to as democratic socialism, in which extensive state regulation with limited state ownership has been employed by democratically elected governments, as in Sweden and Denmark, in the belief that it produces a fair distribution of income without impairing economic growth. I actually kind of like this. I feel like this sums it up for me a lot. I mean, obviously it's being a little vague with some things, but yeah, like social democracy, democratic socialism have kind of been used interchangeably. I still see more of a separation between them for me. Like, I think of, if you're going further left, right, you have social democracy, democratic socialism, and then you start getting into like the socialist, regular, and then communist, and maybe you go down further to the left, bottom left, you're anarchist or left communist, yada yada yada. If you look at like the political compass, which is decent, but I don't think is always fully accurate. But yeah, so like social democracy, democratic socialism are more about, like, with what you were saying, U-Ball, with like the government kind of controlling what rule, basically changing the rules of capitalism a little bit, so that billionaires are paying their fair share, right? We hear that a lot, right? Like, we need the billionaires to pay their fair share. That's socialism. When I personally don't think that's socialism. I think that's just people feeling like if we can give a couple more dollars for the billionaires, we can fund healthcare, which I think is good, but capitalism still exists, right? That's the big distinction, I think, with social democracy and democratic socialism, is that, capitalism still exists. They're still worried about economic growth. I mean, shit, Elizabeth Warren, who called herself a democratic socialist or social democrat, one of the two, she was talking on Twitter a couple weeks ago about how all the military defense private companies, that there's only 3, and we need to have more diverse ones, which is just funny. But you see what I mean? Where, like, they think that's good, that if we spread out, if there's less companies, or major companies like an Amazon and whatnot, if we split them all up, then capitalism will be fine. It won't be as bad. And it's, a lot of people talk about FDR being like the socialist president, even though I would argue that he more saved American capitalism, because it was collapsing. It was pretty much coming to a point where people were like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And then he did the New Deal and whatnot, creating some social welfare programs, such as I believe it was I don't think the minimum wage was around then or not, but he did create Social Security and whatnot. So yeah, there's a whole conversation here, but for the most part, I just wanted to show like just this one section here, because I feel like it kind of breaks it down really well. There's Wikipedia. Not going to really read all this, but socialism is a political philosophy and movement encompassing a range of economic social systems which are characterized by social ownership of the means of production as opposed to private ownership. I like this definition too on a broad level, just because social ownership could mean through a state, could mean a community, a commune, it could mean, if it's, you have a co-op or something. Not saying that's socialism, but that, like, in terms of having like maybe 5 or 6 people in one area, in a large area, that could be like, social ownership or whatever. So it's about relationships to a degree with that. Yeah, so there's that. And I wanted to show this one, because this is, to me, kind of funny. There's some funny things in this. So this is from Wall Street Mojo. This is what I use Ecosia, however you pronounce it. Cassia search. Supposedly they plant trees for research you do. So I use it. But I was like looking up like socialism versus communism, because I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, where, like I said, Karl Marx kind of used it interchangeably. And then I believe it was Lenin who kind of differentiated of socialism to communism as a stage. It might be talked about in other what's the word? teachers, and I don't want to call them teachers, but writers like Lenin, inspirational people for some. So yeah, but when I was searching for that, I found this, and I just thought this was funny because we gotta look at it from the lens of Wall Street Mojo. You know, they obviously are about Wall Street, about stock trading. They have free video tutorials and everything. You know, investment banking. And so this is straight from, I think, like the capitalist mouth a little bit of like, what is communism versus socialism? You know, like what to them is that, and how they describe some things is, I don't know, just a little funny to me because, once again, there's that, they're going to try to demonize this because, you know, they're the ones in control. They're the ones who get money off of this kind of stuff, so off of Wall Street and whatnot. So this kind of thing scares them because it means that, you know, they would have the same power as everyone else. So yeah, communism versus socialism. So I just thought this was funny. The primary difference between communism versus socialism is the nature of ownership of assets. In communism, the ownership of the factories, residential properties, and agricultural lands is state-owned without any private ownership. However, in socialism, the ownership of land, factories, and agricultural land lie with the private sector of individuals. Socialism can exist within the framework of democracy, where there's no democracy in communism. In communism, there's no religion besides the state. Socialism allows people to practice a religion. I'm just like, what? It's such a random. They like bring religion into it. I just think that was funny, and also, the ownership of land, factories, and agricultural land lie with the private sector of individuals. That's not based on everything else we read, right? And you know what we've been saying. That doesn't make any sense. But I love this. I love that they're like, this is communism, right? It shows one guy, or I guess one worker. I don't know. Like they have bow ties on. I don't know what they're supposed to represent, but one dude has all the money, and all these three people are, you know, not to be down with it. I guess I don't know. They're kind of just standing there. And then here is people like doing the same pose as this guy, but yeah, this guy still has the money, and they're happy. I don't know why they're happy here, and then. Like, I feel like this graph doesn't really show anything, or this picture doesn't show anything. Here's another funny thing. Socialism and communism have the same roots in worker exploitation, but different characteristics. Which is funny because the whole, like, root of socialism and communism is the idea of, like, you know, the workers controlling the means of production, them having the say in what they're making and creating and the hours they're working, all that stuff. But they're like, no, that's worker exploitation. Right now, where we're in the current like economic system we're in, there is no worker exploitation. Just thought that was like, I don't know, just seems ironic. I'm like what it like you go into work every day because you have to. Because if you don't, you can't pay rent, and if you don't pay rent, then you have no housing, and if you have no housing, you know, you start getting into health issues and all that, yada, yada, yada. If you can't get money, you can't buy food. You can starve and you can die. That's exploitation because, like, you can only go to work to survive. But somehow they're like, yeah, this is worker exploitation. Both reject capitalism. Yeah. And there's like a whole thing here. I'm not going to go through this. But yeah, I just thought some of the notes were funny. Yeah, once again, showing this picture. But, yeah, I wanted to show that one because that was funny. All right, we're about 49 minutes in. And, yeah, by the way, when I'm, like, writing up these, I guess, sessions, I wasn't sure how long it would be. My goal is to at least get to an hour, so I think we're going to get to that for sure. I feel like if I can get to 2 hours, I'll take that as a win, because I'm always worried I didn't have enough stuff written down. But, the next thing I had planned is good news stuff, like I mentioned earlier, where we'll be talking about some, kind of take a break from all this kind of more theory or what is socialism definitions. We'll take a kind of like a break by doing the kind of fun and just general good news vibes. And then we can go into some more reading, and then we have some videos to end. Does that sound good, or should we? We could always save, I guess, the good news stuff for the end, but I feel like the videos will be more fun at the end, more entertaining than me reading and talking. But we can always play it by ear. We could always change things around, and like I said, like this structure could always go to a different direction with it. But let's see here. Yeah, I mean, like the good news things, there's like 4 things, and they're not gonna be too long. Not gonna be too long. Also, by the way, if I sound stuffy, it's because my nose has been. I don't know if I'm getting a cold or what. I've been a little blah last couple days. I think it could be also allergies. All right, let's go to the good news / fun things. I think I have it up here, right? Yeah. So the first thing here, yeah, I think is good news. Obviously, great news. So Minnesota governor signs executive order protecting gender transition healthcare. So St. Paul, shout out to Minnesota. I went to Minnesota back in late January. Loved it there. But it's cool to see that they're doing this. So yeah, Governor Tim Walz signed an executive order Wednesday protecting the rights of LGBTQ people from Minnesota and other states to receive gender transition healthcare as he slammed the tide of other states rolling back transgender rights. Quote, we want every Minnesotan to grow up feeling safe, valued, protected, celebrated, and free to exist as their authentic versions of themselves, Walz said. Protecting and supporting access to gender-affirming healthcare is essential to being a welcoming and supportive state. Advocates for LGBTQ rights say Republican-led states across the country are trying to erase the legal existence of people who are trans and to restrict the expression of those who are non-binary, gender fluid, or who perform in drag. According to Human Rights Campaign, more than 150 bills targeting trans rights have been introduced in other states. That's been the scariest thing the last couple years. 150 bills. That's a lot of bills. I think in, what was it? Arkansas, well, and I think it was Arkansas where they like banned drag in public places, which is just attacking trans people. But yeah, this is, like I said, just like them signing this executive order is huge because this provides like a safe state for people to go, especially in the Midwest where they are kind of right near a lot of the red states there. While singing out neighboring South Dakota, where Governor Kristi Noem signed a ban on gender transition care for minors last month. I don't care what a group of people in Pierre who decide to make life miserable and more dangerous for people are thinking, but it's not going to happen in Minnesota. Wall's executive order parallels legislation awaiting a floor vote in the state house to make Minnesota a trans refuge state. By protecting trans people, family, and care provides from a range of legal repercussions for traveling to Minnesota for gender transition care, which includes a wide range of social and medical interventions. So yeah, good shit. Just good shit. We'll take this win out of what's been kind of really shitty across the board, really. But yeah, please pay attention to this shit, because this is just really scary. And people should take it more seriously. Like, you know, just because, I don't know, it's just disgusting is what it is. But yeah, good on Minnesota. Yeah, that was kind of like the good news item. This is, I guess, a good news if you're into electoral politics, I guess. I just thought it was kind of fun. Not funny, but fun. So Marianne Williamson, you might remember her from the 2020 primaries, Democratic primaries. She ran. She didn't like do very well. I don't remember when she dropped out, but I want to say it was Because I know she's like everyone was running like 2019 going into 2020. I don't remember when she dropped out, but I feel like it was after the first couple primary votes in like Iowa and whatnot. Or maybe it was after Nevada. Might have been after Nevada. I don't know. But you know, people like to meme on her for the crystal ball and the auras and all that shit. I never really like disliked her. I mean, she seemed to like kind of talk about like a lot of what, you know, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren kind of talked about at debates and whatnot, or at least on social. But yeah, so she announced that she is running for president for 2024. And maybe you have the question, are you allowed to do that? Because she'd be running under the Democratic bill, I believe. So yeah, you're actually allowed to primary a sitting president going into the next election. It's just it hasn't been done in a very long time. I want to say I think Jimmy Carter was the last one, if I remember correctly. Maybe someone can fact check me, but I think Jimmy Carter was he was primary, but he won his primary, or like they conceded. Yeah, basically you're allowed to, and you can like force an election, but the Democratic Party itself might not even do debates, might not even do elections unless there's like a certain amount of like signatures or whatever. I'm sure it's a state by state thing as well. But you know, a lot of people are like, Biden's been, you know, Biden beat Trump, and that's cool, I guess. You know, I mean, I hate Trump obviously, but Biden's not amazing, pretty shitty if anything. Further right, I think, than like Obama was, right? No matter what he claims to be, you know, the most labor friendly president or whatever. But yeah, now it's been almost 3 years since Biden's been president, and a lot of people went back to brunch. You know, a lot of people went back to brunch, and you know, but I feel like some people did stick around and have been criticizing Biden ever since he took office, and rightfully so. But maybe that's just my Twitter feed. But but I think it's like his Biden's like approval rating is pretty bad, if I remember, last time I saw it. So obviously it fluctuates, but for the most part it's been pretty awful. So I think this is actually good news because I just think it's good to challenge. I don't really believe in electoral politics anymore, but I do like, I guess, the almost political theater for it, maybe. I don't know. I'm sick and twisted, maybe. But yeah, I think it's good that you have someone challenging a sitting president who just kind of sucks. Not kind of, does suck, right? So let's hear her little video.
I'm Marianne Williamson.
Oh, hold on, let me stop the music. Actually, I'll just turn this up. I think we'll be good.
And when I was growing up, America had a vibrant middle class. The average American worker had decent benefits, could afford a home, could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford for one member of the couple to stay home.
This is like 1950s when we mean American families, we really mean just white families in suburbia, right? But I mean, I get what she's trying to say, but it's funny when I think of, when someone says that, like, "Oh, we gotta get back to like that time," and it's like, yeah, but like there was like segregation and racism and, you know, all that.
If they wished, and could afford to send their kids to college. But
see, afford to send their kids to college? It should just be free.
over the last 50 years, there's been a massive transfer of wealth to the tune of $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%, decimating America's middle class.
True.
We all owe President Biden a debt of gratitude for defeating President Trump in 2020. But with the things that they're going to be throwing at us in 2024, we need to submit to the American people an agenda of fundamental economic reform, universal health care, tuition-free colleges at state colleges and universities, higher education including tech schools, paternity and maternity leave, free child care, and a guaranteed living wage. These are things that are considered moderate positions in every other advanced democracy.
True.
But in the United States,
it's so funny is that, like, because the term liberal, even, like, and I'm going to shit on some libs for a second here, but liberals, right? You know, like, I feel like a lot of liberals in the United States are socially progressive, right? They might say Black Lives Matter. They say they care about trans folk or whatever, right? But they're like, conservatively economic conservatives, right? So like they still believe in capitalism. They still, want their money. They don't want they maybe like taxes to a general degree, but you know what I mean? Like they believe in the stock market, et cetera, et cetera. Believe in America, But what's funny is like that attitude is considered like center, if not like further to the right in like other Western countries. But like it's seen here as like so far left if you're a liberal. Like that's how far right like the United States really is. And that's what's just mind-boggling to me. That the number one nation is actually like super conservative, and it's America's great if you're rich. That's all I'm gonna say.
United States, people have been trained to expect too little. The American people.
Right. Well, let's run that back. Hear what she has to say.
In every other advanced democracy. But in the United States, people have been trained to expect too little.
They have.
The American people
Human
have been
together
played.
strong.
What the Democratic Party should
Thanks
do
for the
is
follow.
to truly return to the principles of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, not just alleviate people's suffering.
Going back to what I was saying earlier with like people think of kind of socialism and equate it to like FDR, right? Here it is again.
But offer them genuine economic reform, not just help people survive in an unjust system. The Democratic Party should end an unjust system.
And like, I mean, shit. 2 years ago, I was like, yes. And I still say yes. I'm not gonna be like yes. I'm gonna say yes to this. Because we gotta take it a step further, in my opinion. This is why one of the reasons we're doing this session or this kind of show here is if we consider it unjust for the top 1% to own all this wealth. Why is that unjust? That's the question, right? Why do we see that as unjust? Does anyone have any answers to that? Why do we see billionaires owning all this wealth as unjust? Is it because it's just like, I want that money? Is it really just only that? Or is it that these billionaires don't work? They're not the ones who make the product. They're not the ones who do the job to get the money. And they don't pay taxes. That helps. They don't that helps too, for sure. But that's what I'm saying. Let's take that a step further. If it's unjust that the person who doesn't do anything gets all the money and all the benefit, really, wouldn't that apply to every job? To you and your boss? Even if you have the nicest boss in the world, why do they get this set of money when you make a product that equals their paycheck? For example, going back to the factory, right? You work at a car factory and you make 100 cars a day, and each car is, let's say, $100,000 or whatever it is, right? We're making a bunch of Priuses or whatever. We do that, right? But then your paycheck for the year is, let's say, like $60,000, and that's probably too high in some factories currently. But let's say $60,000. You already made a car that's going to be sold for more than your yearly salary, but then the boss is going to get probably almost every cent of every car that you created. You created that car. He didn't create that car. He just owns the factory that you created the car in. So if you, I would just say, if you're mad about billionaires having all this wealth, like Elon Musk, right, and the Bezos, right, they have all this money. What's up, Ryro? Have all this money, right? And where do they get it from? They get it from, we're like, oh, well, Amazon workers only get paid $15 an hour. Okay, pay all Amazon workers $100 an hour. he will still be making money because of all the products he's selling, and at the rate they're selling it, they own a whole basically industry. Amazon owns a whole industry, right? That is to me, you can disagree, but to me is what made me more of made me go into the anti-capitalist lens a couple years ago, or last couple years, which is realizing that there's a sort of contradiction there, right? That like, if I'm mad about the billionaire having all this money off the backs of all these people, just because if they start paying him more, which would be good, even in the, just because we live in under capitalism. But like, if in a just world, we're talking about just versus unjust. To me, a just world is Jeff Bezos works on the line with us, and we can make the cars together. And we only make enough cars for what we need. We don't make 50,000 and only sell 20,000, right? It goes back to the socialism thing, right? Like, what is that definition? And that goes back to what I believe in, which is we get to decide too. Like, hey, we don't need all these cars. Yeah, they're cool. Maybe like this Prius might look nice, but maybe we don't. Or maybe we make everyone a Prius and it's free, and then everyone just gets to drive a Prius or whatever car, right? Or maybe we don't need cars. Maybe we don't need them. Maybe we could just do public transportation. It's a whole other conversation, but yeah.
Washington, D.C., with a few brave exceptions, is filled with two major categories.
There's my rant.
Those who don't even care about all the...
Were you right before, now that you're left? I mean, I wouldn't say I was right, but I was probably more like lib. Like, definitely like centrist lib. Probably like 8 years ago, 5 years ago. I didn't really start becoming anti-capitalist until kind of when Bernie lost and the pandemic hit, where you start realizing that the government doesn't give two fucks about you, and your boss doesn't give two fucks about you, as long as they get that profit. That's when I started really exploring that. But yeah, I was like a political science minor in college and stuff, and I was kind of just like, never really looked at it from a like too much of an economic lens. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, yeah, I care about people. Like, we shouldn't, this was, 2015. So like at the time it was like, yeah, like people should have more rights. But I also didn't really believe in like protesting, or like, I still liked the flag. Okay. I still liked the American flag. Now? So, but yeah, there wasn't like a one day I'm like, I am anti-capitalist now. It's kind of just, I feel like it's a lot of natural progression. I've talked to a lot of people who came out of like the Bernie Sanders, both runs, because I didn't really pay attention in 2017 too much. And I voted Green Party or whatever in New York, which didn't really matter. Yeah, and then when like Hillary lost, I was kind of like, okay, well, we'll see how it goes. I was one of those people. Like, I'm like, oh, it might not be that bad. So I've grown. I've grown. And that's what I always want to emphasize with this thing, this session here, or this show, is that we're all at different spots politically, and we all come from different ways of life and whatnot. So we're growing together. We're growing together.
Suffering that's going on out there, and those who
don't worry, Marianne Williamson's going to win in 2024, and then everything will be solved.
who do not have the moral courage to fix it. Let me in there. I will.
I actually, okay, let's say hypothetical. Let's say it's Trump, Biden, and Williamson. Somehow, I think she's running as a Democrat. Does it say on her website? Or is she running independent? I mean, it's not a blue, it's a lot of Democrat going on. I mean, if she's running independent, good for her. I respect the fuck out of that. Do people know her? Yeah, I mean, if you followed, like, I think if you're a Democrat voter, you know her. Does the general populace know her? That's a good question. She has a couple years to go. So if anything, announcing now I think is good, because I think if there's going to be any Democratic primaries, you're going to start seeing that in like probably this fall, I think. You've never heard of her? Yeah, she used to be like made fun of for being like the orb lady and stuff. Is there any chance of Bernie running again? I don't think he said he wouldn't, but he hasn't said he would. So I guess take that. Here's the thing. I love Bernie. I wouldn't be here without Bernie, like politically. So I respect him a ton. But he's very much like, at the end of the day, he really believes in like party unity. You know, he's an independent, but he really does believe in party unity, and he does believe in like defeating conservatives. So like, I think he would only run against Biden if there was like a significant number of polling that they could pull from to say that like Biden's not going to beat Trump, because it's going to be Trump or DeSantis in my opinion, or maybe a third person who hasn't announced yet. I don't really know who that would be. So we'll see. I mean, if I'm still doing this kind of show, maybe we'll do little spin-offs with it where we cover more electoral politics. I hate that I like electoral politics. I hate it. But I do. But yeah, I don't know. I think Harris is done. I know there's been rumors that they might try to... Because like I said, you can technically primary a sitting president, but it hasn't happened since, I think, Jimmy Carter. No, you're not interrupting anything. I want this to be kind of like a free-forming thing. We'll get to our thing. This is the fun section, so it's okay. We're taking a break. We did 40 minutes of just like, what is socialism? So, but yeah, you can technically primary a sitting president. It's just like considered bad to do. That's why I'm curious if she is running independent or as a Democrat. Why do you hate electoral politics? Because I'm more of an anarchist at this point, and I believe that the government isn't going to lead to into our salvation, I guess, or whatever you want to describe it as. We're not going to vote our way to communism. We're not going to vote our way to anarchism. We're not going to vote our way to a classless society, because the government is a form of domination. The government can tell the police to come bust down my door and arrest me for whatever reason they want, if they really wanted to. That's a form of domination. If I try to strike against my boss, theoretically, once again, the government can get involved and be like, you can't strike. We saw that with Biden with the train strike, because they were so worried of it collapsing the economy instead of caring about the fact that the workers only had one sick day a year. So like, I just don't believe in it, I guess, anymore. I do, I guess, to a degree, I guess can say that, like, at least, example with the Minnesota governor here protecting gender transition healthcare, that to a degree it can at least, it can help do what's the term, quality, not quality control. Blanking on the word. Lessen the damage, I guess, is the best way to describe it. There's a word for that. English hard. Anarchism is easier to be hopeful about. It's more hopeful than just accepting that the world is heating up and fascism is on the rise. I'd rather believe in something like that. You don't have to agree with it. It's okay. Like I said, I'm not saying don't vote either. Like, I think you should vote, at least in your local elections. I just don't think the president of the United States, is gonna like fundamentally change my life outside of if he canceled student loan debt already. I know it's been more on the lawyers at this point, but you know what I mean. Never really understood anarchism. Well, this is going to be the series for you. We're not really focusing on that today specifically, but it's kind of like the loose lens of this. Anarcho-communists, I guess, is the term. It's all labels, right? To me, if you're anti-capitalist, you're anti-capitalist. There's just maybe we have different opinions of how to end it. Yeah, Noam Chomsky, yeah, I've heard him describe himself as an anarchist. I haven't listened to enough of his stuff, but he seems like reasonable. Having no government or police make us less safe. Does the police make us safe? Do they? When you get robbed, when do the police show up? After you've been robbed. They don't stop the robbing. The government doesn't keep us safe in the sense that when there's a pandemic, they don't enforce employers to follow COVID guidelines. No, I mean, I know it's tough. It's our system is so catered to, like, it's anarchism is, like, I think considered like so left leaning and wild because it's like fundamentally so different than what our current structure is that it's hard to imagine it. Trust me, there's some things I believe in and I'm like, I don't know how it's possible, but I think that should be a goal. You know, that's kind of the anarchism. I think a lot of it too is, for me, a belief in like ending hierarchies. If there's police, that's a hierarchy thing because we put a social status on police. We put a social status on government officials. We have a social status for our boss, our teachers, all that. That's forms of domination and hierarchies. And I think that kind of going back to the differentiation between like some communists and anarchists is communists, aren't necessarily opposed to certain hierarchies. They, Marxist Leninists, a lot of them believe in that there's what's the term? Gosh, I'm blanking on words today. Sorry. There's a group of people who know what's best for the movement, a group of people who know what's best for society, and we have to trust them. Forgetting the freaking word for it. It's on the tip of my tongue. But it's what the Soviet Union did during the revolution. They had a group of people. They had the party that decides what's best for the entire nation, for the communities, etc. Yeah, I mean, I really believe that at the end of the day, if you have great relationships with your neighbors, your community, that you will find ways to, not saying crime and robbery and all those things would disappear, but at least you can combat them more effectively, because if someone is stealing, you have to ask, why are they stealing? Most people who are stealing aren't doing it because they just like to steal. It's because they have to, So it's like thinking about it that way. But yeah, just go on the anarchist subreddit and you'll see the many debates about like questions like that, where it's like, what do we do with murderers and all that? So there's no right, like I said, it's not as black and white. I don't know if you were here for that, but at the beginning I was saying that like not everything and socialism is black and white. Let me jump into, yes, if you want to read more about Marianne Williamson, there's a little bit more here from Jacobin. I didn't read all of it, but I read a good chunk of it. Basically, it's just making an argument for that, making him defend his record, right? Anarchism is the most accessible, so you talking simply helps. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I've been reading up on it. No, I'm in one of my study circles. I do. There are a lot of people who are more anarchist leaning, so they read a lot more of that kind of stuff. But we do read a lot about Karl Marx and all that. So try to challenge myself and just come to my own conclusion. But no one's gonna. I think what's cool about anarchism is that it's a ideology that isn't so like everyone has to think this way. Like, it's very much about freedom of like, what works for our community might not work for your community. What works for me might not work for you, and that's okay. That's what I like about it compared to like a lot of the more historically Marxist Leninism and whatnot, where it's a little bit too much. No, this is the way we have to do it. This is the rules. This is what we have to do. This is the way we have to do revolution and all that. When anarchism more like, we know what's best for let's say you live in a town of 100 people. We know what's best for us compared to the town maybe next to us. We can work with that town and have trade and all that. If anything, if you've seen the show The Last of Us, spoilers for The Last of Us, I'll give people a second if they don't want spoilers. But there's one episode where they go to basically a commune. That's pretty close to what I kind of envisioned. Obviously, there's some liberties with it a little bit, but it's funny when I saw that, I'm like, oh shit, this is based. Yeah, a lot of people do discount anarchism. Yeah, unfortunately, which is sucks because I don't try to discount them too much. You know, like I get it. It's because anarchism is usually tied with libertarianism, and the word libertarian has been co-opted by the right. So, because you have the Ben Shapiro's. So yeah, I want to talk about this one last funny-ish topic, good news topic, and then we're gonna go jump back into some reading, which hopefully isn't too boring. And then we have some videos, and then we'll end it. So I don't know how much longer that'll be, but I've already passed my goal of an hour. I'm very happy with myself. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's heard of Havana syndrome. It's been kind of a topic for the last couple of years, and a lot of people on the left that I follow on Twitter and whatnot quickly called bullshit on Havana syndrome when it first was announced. Basically, people like in Cuba, first reported in Cuba in 2016. This has been a lot longer. I thought it was a couple of years ago, but a lot longer. Basically, they hear like a buzzing. Jesus Christ.
My Uncle Pete has Havana syndrome. He got it from visiting a foreign country.
Jesus Christ.
Really
Sorry.
scary. Curson's dress to curson I.
Curson I. Thanks, Ethan, for 61 months. Yeah, I'm sorry about your Uncle Pete. All right. But the syndrome he has isn't real. But yeah, long story short, it's this. They're saying that there's like a buzzing, which is actually microwaves that causes dizziness, gives headaches, migraines. It was only happening to people in like Cuba, like Havana, and like other parts of Russia, China, Colombia, I think it says here. Yeah, so like people thought that everyone but the United States and its Western allies have some sort of microwave device that only affects Americans. Which just doesn't make any sense on face value. That, you know, especially Cuba, one of the poorest countries in the world, somehow has a microwave weapon that can only hit certain people effectively. A lot of people who are calling bullshit on this are like, well, the buzzing is really just all the cicadas that live in. There's a lot of cicadas and crickets and those kind of bugs in Cuba. I had a whole bunch growing up in Rochester, in the more rural part of it. We always had like bugs and stuff. I love that noise. It's advanced tech, right? So the Havana syndrome was first reported in Cuba in 2016. The mysterious malady, how do you say that? Malady? The mysterious initially afflicted U.S. embassy staff in Havana, especially those attached to intelligent missions, and it then spread to Canadian embassy officials. The sudden headaches, debilitating dizziness, and debilitating dizziness, and hearing excruciatingly painful sounds struck both at work and at home. So it's not just at work, it was at home. Oddly, the Cubans themselves appeared immune to the pathology. So basically the U.S. Defense Department was reporting on it, and then they started doing like a bunch of like research. U.S. State Department called it an absolute priority. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken believed there was nothing we should take more seriously. The U.S. is really good at naming bad things with the names of foreign places. Imagine Houston disease. Yeah, right. Like, or yeah. I mean, even Trump was doing with COVID, right? So like, yeah, it's just, it's funny. We believe that the Cuban government could stop the attacks on our diplomats. So yeah, they even evacuated people in 2017. That's how bad it was. Yeah, it's also, racism. So they kept going, and then the Cubans deployed 2,000 scientists. They even were like, maybe we are doing microwaves. We'll check ourselves. And so they checked, and they didn't find anything. But they were hampered by the refusal by the U.S. government to share medical information on those supposedly afflicted by Havana syndrome. So they didn't even let them be like, hey, maybe there is something going on. And Cuba has one of the best, they have all the, some of the best doctors in the world. It's one of their exports is they actually send nurses and stuff to a lot of places in South America and whatnot. So yeah, they're trying, Cuba is even being like, hey, we're sorry. They're not even giving them, they're not even disrespecting the Americans to a degree. They're not saying oh, what your diplomats are experiencing isn't we don't, not saying we don't believe it. We actually want to help you find this, but it ain't us shooting microwaves. That's what it's like. Cuba is like being nice about it, and they're trying to help, and the U.S. is like, no, fuck you. It's like we didn't. We're trying to help. Yeah, I remember even like sitting at my at one of my family members' house, and they had the TV on, and then it was CNN, and they started talking about Havana syndrome, and I'm like, they were talking about like, yeah, like it's like crickets, and it sounds like crickets, but it's not, and then it's a whole thing. But yeah, but both the Trump and Biden administrations took it seriously. But long story short, the reason I'm bringing this up is because recently, last year they first had the CIA suggested that Havana syndrome is not a product of hostile power. But then recently they, I forgot where it was here. But basically, long story short, after multiple reviews by different departments, they've come to the conclusion that there's no such thing as Havana syndrome, at least not from a microwave gun. They finally admitted it. So this is another L for the America propaganda machine. Microwaves don't do anything to our ears. I don't know the science behind it, but I don't know. I just like the idea that there's a gun that all our enemies, quote unquote enemies, have that can hit certain people selectively, but not anyone else. That's right. Ethan did have an ear infection. That could have been Ethan. You could have had Havana syndrome. You could have had it. But yeah, that was just a fun thing. So yeah, we have our good news / fun section there. Nice little break, 27-minute break there. Yeah, I thought those were some good stories. Hopefully we get more good news next time we do this. Maybe it's like, you know, I did see that some of the rail workers for, I think it was the one company there that was involved in the East Palestine basically bombing of the town by the trains there. I saw that they finally got like 4 sick days now. Human together strong. Thanks for the follow, appreciate it. Didn't Havana syndrome victims get ultimate socialized healthcare? I mean, I remember, I don't know if it's happening, but I remember the U.S. government or the military was highly like looking into doing some sort of program for Havana syndrome, people who are suffering from Havana syndrome, including at one point I think they were thinking about basically taxing Americans, like having a certain, not that much, but like having some sort of thing that comes out of your paycheck that would go towards Havana syndrome victims. I'm not even joking. I remember seeing that. I remember it was like a year ago. But I know there's one Twitch channel I follow or I watch is Left Flank Vets, and they were all joking that they're all going to start claiming they have Havana syndrome to get that extra paycheck. And I was like, hey, I'll happily let the $5 come out of my paycheck so that you can get free money, because not even just for Havana syndrome, but just from being a vet. Yeah, it should make you mad. It didn't happen, of course, but I thought that was funny. All right, let's go back to the subject at hand. Socialism, right? So we've kind of broken down the different definitions and kind of the little bit of the history about it. And there's some videos, I think one of the videos I have kind of talks about the history of it a little bit more. I just wanted to go over some readings that I found that kind of talk about socialism from the past. There was one that's from the past, from 1911. I want to read that one first. Might not read all of it, but we'll at least get like a general idea. So yeah, Alexander Bogdanov, very Russian. He was actually part of, I believe, the early Bolsheviks up until around the revolution. Thanks, Ethan, for popping in. Have a good rest of your shift. Thanks for popping in. So yeah, I guess he kind of like worked with Lenin, or at least was in that sphere for a little bit. But I do know he's also debated Lenin a lot on like what is like the goal of the party. You gotta remember the context of this too. This is early 1900s. So Karl Marx has been dead for, I don't know, 40 years, whatever the math works on that. Then Lenin, like I said, was one of the who was also writing a lot about socialism versus communism, and kind of the role of the state in it, and like what you need to do for revolution. The reason I pull this is because Bogdanov kind of talks about what a socialist society is to him, and this is 1911. And I just thought this was kind of a cool like way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, I have my own opinions on Lenin. I'm not gonna go too deep into that today. And like I said, I wanted to look at this from just seeing like, what were people talking about in the 1900s, early 1900s, about socialism. Because I know Karl Marx did kind of talk about it, but a lot of what his writings were about was critiquing capitalism, less of pitching like a socialist society. A lot of people think Karl Marx was almost prophetizing or like trying to like tell people how to do socialism. Rather, he always, especially with like capital, much more focused on like how capitalism works and why it's, broken the way it is. So I just want to clarify that. But yeah, Bogdanov is, and I actually looked up more into him, and he has an interesting, let's see if I can get it on Wikipedia here. He has an interesting life, I will say. So he was a rival at one point of the Bolsheviks until he was expelled in 1909, created his own faction. And then he was a Marxist leftist perspective from Lenin. He became an opponent of the Bolshevik government. So like this is a guy who's critiquing even then the early Bolshevik government. But yeah, he died of like doing a blood transfusion because he did a bunch of blood transfusion. Where was it? I was reading about it. He got arrested a couple times for criticisms of because he used to work at Moscow University. Got arrested a couple times. But yeah, he died of blood transfusion because he was doing blood transfusion experiments, hoping to achieve eternal youth. Just crazy. So, not saying he's crazy, but what he was doing back then was crazy. But I guess at the time, the 1900s was wild. People were trying to do some weird science experiments then. So I'm not going to necessarily blame him, but crazy. But yeah, I guess he took blood from a student suffering from malaria and tuberculosis. The student lived, but he died from it. But he did 11 blood transfusions. And he supposedly improved his eyesight, balding, and had other positive symptoms. So yeah, when I was looking into him, I just wanted to make a note of that because I thought that was an interesting thing. But yeah, kind of critical of Lenin, but was there in Russia during the whole Russian Revolution. So yeah, we're gonna read probably not all of this because he talks about like science and stuff a little bit here. But maybe we'll at least skim it. All right. Hey, I'll say this: as a history major, my history teacher told me that it's okay to skim as long as you learn something. So we could skim this a little bit, as long as we're learning something. So yeah, 1911. So remember that when we're reading this. 1911, over 100 years ago. A socialist society is one in which all social production is organized on consciously comradely principles. All the other features of socialism stem from this fact: social ownership of the means of production, abolition of class, and wealth distribution, which allows everyone to fully use their productive energy according to their ability. These conditions can only be realized when there is a basis for their existence. Camaraderie organization of all production, i.e., only when the working class achieves victory and gains the ability to organize society on its own terms. Until that moment, the gradual disappearance of class, the gradual move towards the social ownership of the means of production, and a planned distribution of the social product will not be possible. Any socialism in the property relations between people is not possible until labor relations become fully socialist relations. I like this. I kind of like this. Let me zoom in a little bit. I know it's probably a little bit harder to see when it's farther away on a 720p stream. But yeah, I mean, this is once again talking about the idea that there's a kind of stages to communism. Going back to anarchism a little bit, a lot of anarchists don't really see the stage. They want to just get to communism by... I have a couple subjects in the future kind of talking about this a little bit more, where, you know, like even if you're a China believer, I have my personal opinions on China, but China, you know, is considered to be in the socialist, trying to reach the socialist stage, and eventually they're going to reach the communist stage, right? USSR was the same idea, right? That like, oh, we need to go through stages, it's not going to happen overnight. So he's kind of talking about that a little bit here, but he is talking about a lot about like I said, the socialist relations, which is more than just the means of production, right? Abolition of class. That's kind of that's more of a communism thing. You know, wealth distribution. So he's kind of talking about more of the relationships too. It's more than just if we own the factory, we have to have relationships that are socialist. So socialism is almost an adjective, right? We'll read this next section here. Opportunists are mistaken when they search for the origins of a socialist economy in trade unions, cooperatives, and enterprises of a democratic state and a territorial self-government. The increase of the workers' wage forced on capitalists by the trade unions has nothing to do with socialist distribution. This is what I was talking about earlier. I think we were mentioning how is it socialism to just do unions or have a co-op? I think no. And that's kind of what it's saying here. Is like this isn't socialist distribution. The reason you're getting there's a wage at all is because of capitalism. Capitalism is telling us there's certain value to certain jobs, to certain work. So you're not doing socialism by saying your wages went up a little bit. If only because it does not provide the guarantee of being able to earn that wage. The property of a cooperative remains capitalist property if only because it is a subject to buying and selling, takes the form of money, is stored in a bank, is dependent on the economic cycle and changing prices, etc. Based, right? Like we can try our best to, but we still have to participate to a degree in capitalism. Even if you live in the woods, you still have to come out of the woods to go buy groceries, right? Unless you're a great forager. By the way, that's not, and that's kind of a meme too, is socialism is when you live in the woods. A lot of people on the left say that. Every time conservatives are like, why do you go to work then if you're a socialist? And it's like, like everything is part of capitalism. You watching this stream is part of capitalism. You know, I'm streaming on a platform by a service that I don't have to pay for necessarily, but it's still a service provided by a corporation, right? What was I saying here? Where would you leave off? Yeah, etc. The enterprises of even the most democratic state or the equally democratic self-government in which socialists constitute a majority do not stop being capitalist enterprises, as they are organized on the basis of employment of workers, subservient of the conditions of the labor market, on the market of tools and objects of labor, on the money and credit market, etc. Our U.S. government, a good example of this, relies on the economy. It makes decisions based off the economy. FDR made the New Deal during the Great Depression because it was a response to the Great Depression, right? They probably wouldn't have done that if it wasn't a Great Depression, you know? No different with the student loan debt. You know, they're going to get rid of some of it because they need more people to start spending more money in the market. That will help the economy, right? That's why I want, once again, going back to my anarchism, is that the government isn't really responding to our votes at the end of the day. You know, maybe to a degree on the social laws and whatnot, but the economic ones, the laws that affect like class struggle, they're always going to side with the capitalists. As long as the power of money and capital, the master of world production, are upheld, there's no way we can speak of a socialist economy. However, socialism is not only about the future, but it's also about the present. It is not only an idea, but also reality. Socialism grows and develops and exists among us. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier with We Grow Together. How we're all learning together. Wow. only not where our opportunist comrades search for it. Socialism lies deeper. It is the camaraderie bond of the working class, its conscious organization of labor, and its social struggle. We should not search for socialism in the economic activity of worker organizations, trade unions, parties, or others, but in the actual class cooperation. This is not the socialist prototype, but it is the real foundation as it lies within camaraderie bonds of labor. The more this cooperation grows and develops, the tighter the frames of old society become, and the contradiction between the two becomes clear. That's a big thing with anti-capitalism, too, I feel like, is talking about the contradictions of capitalism. Going back to what I was talking about during the Marianne Williamson thing, there was the how we find it unjust that there's billionaires, but we don't find the unjustment in the sense that all our work is translated to someone else's into their wealth, right? That's a contradiction, you know. Where do we go? I'm so bad. I should just start highlighting. Yeah, the time when these frames start to fall apart under the powerful pressure of a new power, which requires new forms, is not far off. Everything indicates that a series of dangerous revolutions will begin under our own eyes. This epic of last struggle will be surely incredibly difficult and revolutionary crisis. Incredibly cruel. Eventually, the rotten shell will be cast aside. Socialism will cease to be just the class cooperation of the proletariat and will take over production as a whole. New organization of property and distribution, a new social economy will then become reality. Yeah, good shit. This is good shit. Yeah, I'm just gonna link this. If you want to read the rest. Just want to keep us moving. But good shit in here. I think I'll read this last paragraph here, because this is how I got my history degree, which is you read the first and last, and then if you want more, you read more in the middle. The aim is closer to the proletariat than any other class, previous or contemporary. Creating is an unparalleled struggle with old society. Its own forms in all areas of life, in everyday labor and social activity within the family, in scientific and philosophical knowledge, in art, the proletariat will increasingly live its own way. It was socialistically transform itself to then socialistically, holy shit, transform all of humanity. Capitalism is entwined into everything in our lives. It isn't just, the billionaire. It isn't just the stock market, right? He's talking about, like, it's going to be a fundamental change of our entire lives. But yeah, good shit. Good shit. 1911, they were saying this. How much does this tie in to, like, now? Isn't that crazy? Like, talking about trade unions and workers. That's a lot of what, like, the DSA, talks about is, like, we just passed the PRO Act, right? We can do socialism. And he's critiquing that. Back in 1911. He's even critiquing the party. Here's him playing chess, I guess, with Lenin. Is this the equivalent of live streaming back then? Like, like you usually have to just know when, like, two dudes are playing chess, and then you can just show up and watch them play chess. And then you can talk about it. People, yeah, this is like New York City, right? They have, like, the chess boards. I've always wanted to go to, like, one of those and just play a random person. Get my ass handed to me. But yeah, that was one of the readings. Let's see, what else do I have here? Because some of these I only skimmed, so I'm not sure how great they are. Oh yeah, here we go. So I want to talk a little bit about, like, different types of socialism, like why people maybe add adjectives to it. And I use a label of I'm an anarchist communist, right? Also, like, a lot of people I know who are anarchists call themselves libertarian socialists. And even the word libertarian, like I said, has its issues now, right? Because the right has kind of co-opted it. You have the Ben Shapiro's and the Joe Rogans of the world call themselves libertarian, right? Most of the time, they're really just anti-government, but they also believe in capitalism and Also, sometimes they're usually just white supremacists. So, but yeah, this is from 1970s. So we're jumping a bit further in time here. From Canada, The Red Menace. Sounds like a magazine. The Red Menace. Written by Uli Demir. We call ourselves libertarian socialists, but why that adjective? Why libertarian socialism? Is libertarian socialism any different from socialism as it is generally understood? The problem and the reason for this adjective is that there exists no definition of socialism, and that is generally understood. Which was what I was saying earlier at the top. I was like, there's kind of a lot of different definitions, and socialism is different for everybody to a degree, like what they think of it. The dilemma of socialism today is, first of all, the dilemma of the meaning of socialism, because the term has been applied to such as an all-encompassing range of persons, parties, philosophies, states, and social systems, often completely antagonistic to each other. And the very term socialism has become virtually meaningless. And yeah, like I can kind of see this today, where people throw it around a lot, and like I said, it kind of means something one way for me, might mean something different for you. And even like I said, with the right likes to use the word socialism as a derogatory thing. That anytime the Democratic Party like does anything, really, they're like, it's socialism, right? There are more variations of socialism currently in existence than there are varieties of soup on the supermarket shelves. More socialist parties are the correct line than religious sects with a monopoly on salvation. Mostly those people are now governed by states calling themselves socialists. States displaying among themselves of familiar antagonisms, usually held to be hallmarks of capitalist imperialism, as well as every kind of social system presently in existence, from declining tribalism to advanced industrialism. Can there be any meaning worth salvaging in a label that has been claimed by Kautsky, Lenin, Mao, Brezhnev, Gandhi, Hitler, Ed Broadbent, and Karl Marx? Does this term connote anything more than just or good to its proponents, bureaucratic or bad to its enemies? And obviously, Hitler wasn't a socialist. They just co-opted the National Socialist Party, and that's why even the right still uses it against socialists today. But yeah, as it's saying, does the term just become good to some people or bad to the other? The temptation is strong to abandon the label entirely, to adopt some new term to indicate this kind of social change we propose, but to do so would be to attempt to sidestep a problem that really cannot be avoided. For the terminological confusion is not accidental, nor is it merely a matter of words. It is rooted in the fact that the dominant social system always acts to integrate that which it cannot destroy, movements, ideas, even words, and therefore destroys them precisely by integrating them by claiming them. It denies the very possibility of an alternative to itself, improves this impossibility by absorbing the alternative and emptying it of meaning, by adopting new forms and new languages which create the illusion of choice and change while perpetuating the same essential relations of domination. Since the main challenge to capitalism has always come from that which calls itself socialism, it is hardly surprising that capitalist social relations have survived in half the world by calling themselves socialists. Socialism has become another name for capitalism, another form of capitalism. In victory, socialism has been more totally buried than it ever could have been in defeat. Capitalism has dissolved the socialist alternative by sealing away its name, its language, its dreams. You have to take them back. For without words, there will be no concepts, and where there is no language of freedom, there can be no dream of liberation. We still got a little bit more here. Consequently, we cannot simply abdicate the terminology of socialism and arbitrarily invent new labels. To do so, we would be futile, both because any new terms would be similarly sucked dry if they acquire popular recognition, and because the existing language of freedom refers to meanings in history that must be recovered from those who now suppress them by laying claim to them. Words such as socialism, revolution, democracy, and freedom do not contain within themselves a critique of the existing order. That critique can only be realized only by reconquering it and giving it a new life, not by abandoning it for searching for another. Here we go. Let's just skip to this section here. What is implied by the term libertarian socialism? The idea that socialism is free and foremost about freedom, and therefore about overcoming the domination, repression, and alienation that block the free flow of human creativity through, human creativity, thought, and action. As you can tell, I'm not the best at reading aloud, so apologies. Hopefully you're following along. Like I said, I'm just going to link the articles every time we're done reading them, so you can always look it over yourself. We do not equate socialism with planning, state control, or nationalization of industry, although we understand that in a socialist society, parentheses, not under socialism, economic activity will be collectively controlled, managed, planned, and owned. Similarly, we believe that socialism will involve equality, but we do not think that socialism is equality, for it is possible to conceive of a society where everyone is equally oppressed. We think that socialism is incompatible with one-party states, with constraints on freedom of speech, with an elite exercising power on behalf of the people, with leader cults, with any of the other devices by which the dying society seeks to portray itself as a new society. Yeah, this is straight up pretty much anarchism. I mean, that's why a lot of anarchists say they're libertarian socialists, because a lot of what they're saying here, like, I pretty much agree with everything in here. Saying a lot better than how I said it earlier. Approach to socialism that incorporates cultural revolution, women's and children's liberation, and the critique and transformation of daily life, as well as the more traditional concerns of socialist politics. A politics that is completely revolutionary because it seeks to just transform all of the reality. We do not think that capturing the economy and the state lead automatically to the transformation of the rest of the social being, nor do we equate liberation with changing our lifestyles and our heads. Capitalism is a total system that invades all areas of life. Socialism must be overcoming of capitalist reality in its entirety, or it is nothing. Based. Right there, that's based. Capitalism is a total system that invades all areas of life. Socialism must be the overcoming of capitalist reality in its entirety, or it's nothing. Based. Going back to, to me, when I was talking about how socialism is almost less about the economic definition all the time, it's also like the liberation, the freedom part of it, or the spiritual part of that. And these two paragraphs, I love it. Libertarian politics concerns itself with the liberation of the individual because it is collective, and with the collective liberation because it is individualistic. Being a socialist is not only an intellectual thing, a matter of having the right ideas or the right intellectual approach, it also a matter of the way you lead your life. A politics that is revolutionary because, in the words of Marx and Engels, revolution is necessary not only because the ruling class cannot be overthrown any other way, but also because the class overthrowing it can only be in a revolution succeed in ridding itself of the muck of ages and become fitted to found society anew. Good shit. Again. Here, yeah. I'm just going to read this section here. Because revolution is a collective process of self-liberation. Because people and societies are transformed through struggle, not by a decree. Therefore, quote, the emancipation of the working classes can only be achieved by the working class themselves, not by a Leninist vanguard, a socialist state, or any other agent acting on their behalf. This is which I agree with. Not some socialists don't agree with this, right? Example, there's a lot of people like China and whatnot, and think that the way they're doing it is the correct way. But like I said, I very much believe in this because of just what we're currently seeing, just in governments in general, right? They know what's best. We vote on government officials because we assume that they know what's best for us, or they will act in our best interests, right? But can we name one politician that really does that? Really? Yeah, I mean, maybe Bernie, right? But even though I have my critiques of Bernie, right? I don't know if I'm going to go through the rest of this. We don't know if we'll win. History is made by human beings, and where human beings are concerned, nothing is inevitable. But because people do make history, we know that it is possible to build a new world, and we strive to realize that possibility. There's only one reason for being revolutionary, because it's the best way to live. Ugh, as I burp. Great. Great. Yeah, this is good. I'm definitely saving this one for... I want to fully read it, because I know we skimmed some sections, or we skipped some sections there. But yeah, here's the link again. You want to bookmark it. How are we doing on time? We're almost at the 2-hour mark here. I have one other article about workers' councils of Hungary, which kind of talk, which is the it's like a kind of sect of not a sect, but a part of communism. There's the idea of council communism. Actually, the one study circle I'm in, that was kind of how they first got started, was looking at council communism. Maybe we'll look at this one. But yeah, it's about the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Not many people know about this revolution either. Like, I didn't know anything about this until recently. Like, no one really talks about it. Both the USSR and then United States. I feel like it's just never like talked about in history books. Like they had a revolution in 1956. When was this written? So this was submitted back by Ed, September 3rd, 2006. So shout out to Ed, I guess. Author's Nick Heath. Yeah, even the photo looks like it's from 2006. So yeah, this is the history of the Hungarian Workers' Revolution against the communist dictatorship. A general strike was declared, and workers' councils sprung up across the country. Yeah, this is kind of just like a brief historical overview. Yeah, so we are commemorating the 1956 Hungarian uprising. Hungary 56 was a prime example of the working class itself reaching for power. Doubly significant, it took place in one of the mythical workers' states. It showed for many throughout the world a new alternative to capitalism and Soviet communism, Reed state capitalism, and it galvanized movements towards genuine revolutionary politics. Yeah, just talking about how Communist Party was installed. Hundreds were expelled if they, weren't down. A lot of post-World War II stuff. Workers and students in Budapest set up a revolutionary council, not seen since the 1918 revolution. Isn't that the one in Russia, right? No, sorry, there was one in Hungary too. I'm thinking of 1917 Russia. Early on Wednesday morning, as pitched battle swarmed around the radio building while maneuvering continued inside the Communist Party. Gero was replaced as first secretary by Janos Kadar. Kadar from the working class. He had been a Titoist and has been imprisoned and tortured horribly. Bureaucrats thought it was a fine move. Perfect stop to rising discontent. In response, to the Revolutionary Council of Workers and Students issued leaflets demanding a general strike. Russian tanks rolled into the city in the same day and fierce fighting broke out. Barricades were built from barrels. Later, these were strengthened with railway coaches and weapons from a goods yard. Workers and students used Molotov cocktails, arms they had captured, and even a small field gun, which they bombarded the tanks. Strike called for a Revolutionary Council of Workers. Students spread through the whole Budapest and industrial towns. List there. Radio station broadcast messages against the Stalinists, telling people not to be fooled by the government into surrendering their arms. Many councils quickly issued programs calling for political and civil liberty and the withdrawal of Russian troops, workers' management of the workplace and of the industry, the banning of the AVO, and freedom of trade unionists and parties. So yeah, they were just basically basically these councils were made to kind of run not just the workplaces but the surrounding towns, because a lot of these everyone in the towns mostly worked at the same, factory and whatnot. Yeah, but yeah, this was I remember like some of these articles I found like months ago. But yeah, this one's just I think a good overview of events that happened in Hungary, but kind of talking about like an attempt for socialism that isn't through a state. This is workers' councils. So, which I think is like its own. You could dive into workers' councils by itself alone. There's a lot of stuff on that. But there's a link to that. That's really pretty much all the reading I had. I did have a link to Red Emma's, which is a cool bookstore, coffee house in Baltimore. If you're ever in Baltimore, go check them out. But yeah, I was showing this as an example of like how they're a co-op, right? So everyone kind of owns. Or I think they do. I think they say somewhere here where they're like they all own it, right? It's not there's not like a boss. There's not a one person who gets more than the other. They all have their own jobs that they do. Yeah, workers cooperatives. A big part of our project is demonstrating that the ideals we have politically and possible are translating to the real world. We wanted to show that anarchism doesn't mean being disorganized, and that anti-capitalism doesn't mean being unable to operate efficiently and effectively. So yeah, they're really cool. You can go get baked goods and coffee, and also buy books there. Obviously, once again, kind of what we talked about in the Bogdanov piece here. Is that like they still have to a degree participate in capitalism, right? They still have to set prices for their products and whatnot based off, what other coffee shops are doing and whatnot. But still think this is great to do. Have a co-op, still pretty cool thing. I wish I could work in a co-op, but yeah, go check them out if you're ever in Baltimore. It's actually where I got this book that I showed earlier, and a couple other books. All right, let's jump into our last section here, which is I have 2 videos. Kind of just going again, talking about like the different types of socialism that or the different definitions of them and like what it means to some people. There's a video I have by Second Thought, which is a YouTube channel that does a lot of leftist like video content, video essays. Then I have one of Richard Wolff. I forget what he calls himself, but he's I believe at least an anti-capitalist in some degree. Talks about the different kinds of socialism. That's by Democracy at Work. So let's start with Socialism for Absolute Beginners by Second Thought here. And hopefully this doesn't affect the VOD in any way. Oh, and here's the video to it, or the link to it. So like if you want to open it on your end and then mute it, you can watch along with me, but then maybe have this one running just to give them a view. Maybe then subscribe to them, because they made this content and I want to make sure they get credit for it. I think I'm just going to turn the music off for now. We don't need it running anymore. Yeah, so this is Socialism for Absolute Beginners. We'll turn subtitles on. It's auto-generated, so hopefully it's pretty accurate. 24 minutes, so I'm sure I'm going to stop it here and there and talk, but I'll try my best not to stop it too often. But yeah, just think about all the things that we've been talking about, all the things we've kind of read and whatnot, and then go into this. And this is for beginners. So, and I remember watching this video a while back. I don't remember every section of it, but I remember it being a solid vid. So here we go.
This episode and others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. My AdSense revenue has completely tanked in the last couple months. So if you'd like to help support this channel and get a bunch of cool perks
go
while you're
give
at
them
it, consider becoming a patron.
If you like this video, go to their
patreon.com/secondthought.
Patreon.
Who could possibly think socialism is a good thing?
Socialism is a cocktail that never should be tried.
No, it's turpentine.
None of those
Bah.
ingredients are good.
The last thing we want in the United States is socialism.
According to a new survey, 70% of American millennials say they'll likely vote socialist, and 1 in 3 of them view communism favorably.
The term socialist
LOL.
has been gaining traction for the past couple of years. There's a good chance an increasing number of people around you are using that word to describe themselves. More and more Americans are. Maybe one of those people even sent you this video.
Hold on. There we
Maybe
go.
one of those people even sent you this video. This video is about what people
I
mean
kinda
when
sent
they
you this
call
video,
themselves
so.
socialists. I'm going to be covering as much ground as possible in as little time as I can to give you a better understanding of a word we hear all the time, but that rarely gets explained all that well. And before we do, I know that at least a chunk of you will be coming in with a negative opinion of socialism, and that's totally fine. Feel free to voice that in the comments or the invisible to you but very real to me dislike bar. All I ask is that you stick around for a while after you do. Politics is all about disagreement, but to have meaningful disagreements, you need to know what it is you disagree with. Let's get started. The central idea that unites all socialists is maximizing freedom for everyone, regardless of who they are. Generally speaking, socialists want people to have the kinds of rights that ensure they have that freedom. The guaranteed right to education, healthcare, food, and shelter.
Yeah, right. Like this goes to like I said, the economic definition, kind of the OG definition of socialism being like a social collective of the means of production, right? The workers owning the means of production. That, to me, like even like to like going back to my almost like I said spiritual part of socialism for me is like having this belief that we're all human, we all deserve a certain things to survive, right? Hello, hi comrade. Brazil, sick. I hope to go to Brazil one day. Hope it's all good there. I know it's been tough there for a couple years politically, so hopefully it's getting better. We're just watching this video here towards the end of this stream a little bit. The subject of today has been socialism and like how has the word been used? What does it mean to some people? What's the definition of it? How is it, socialism versus communism, all that stuff. So it's been kind of just a good first episode here, being like, what the heck is socialism? And so we did some reading. We then took a break and watched some good news / fun things, and then went back to more reading. And now we're finishing it with some vids here. So yeah, from the U.S. I'm in Colorado. So like west, but almost Midwest too. Colorado's in that weird spot.
To participate in and constitute democratic bodies, the right to free time and leisure. All of these are rights that increase our freedom and
South
the
Park
extent
State.
to which we can flourish and live
That's
a good
true.
life.
I forget about
But
that.
it's not enough that these rights exist on paper. People
Human
need to be able
together
to
strong.
exercise them. If you have the freedom to an education,
thanks for
but can't
the
afford
follow,
to spend
appreciate
even
it.
1 hour less on the job to go to class, then you don't really have the freedom to an education. The law says you do, but you're not actually free to enjoy it. Think about it like this. We might have missed out on 1,000 Einsteins because poverty kept them from achieving their full potential. Having
Yeah.
freedom and the actual ability to exercise it is critical. And this central concern with freedom
I could have been smarter, okay? I could have been Einstein. I know what he's saying, but I'm joking.
isn't very surprising.
I could have been
Every
Einstein.
political theory wants to maximize or guarantee freedom in some way. If the US had its own ideology, Americanism or something, its advocates would also say it's all about freedom. And to be fair, capitalism did after all become the way of life for most people around the world, at least in part because it allowed some people to be more free than they had been before. Because before capitalism, there was something else. Feudalism. Think medieval castles with
There is people out there who legit believe we should go back to feudalism. I just think that is crazy.
heaped tables of George R.R. Martin-esque pigs with apples in their mouths and guys with cool names.
I mean, there's like a weird fascination with like kings and queens, right? Though, like I love the movie The Green Knight. There, like that shit's so cool. But when you think about it, it would suck to be a peasant, right?
Like Thor.
It would suck more than being a worker under capitalism.
Under feudal society, the people who were free made up a tiny group. Kings and other nobles were free. Everyone
And when I say capitalism is better than feudalism, that doesn't mean I like capitalism, right? Just to be clear.
else lived under their control and generally had
I
very
forget I can just
little
press
freedom.
spacebar, right?
After all,
Yeah.
Nobles owned all the land in their kingdom. So if you weren't a noble, but you wanted a place to live, to not be in total abject poverty, and to have a semblance of security, you were forced into working the noble's land. A pretty sweet deal for the nobility, because once you had done all the work, farming and whatnot, they would collect their taxes and force you to give up the products of your labor, grain, meat, or the money made from trading them with others. But feudalism wouldn't last forever. The emergence of capitalism changed feudal society into something entirely new. Over a couple hundred years, merchants gained more autonomy from feudal lords and became a whole new class of relatively free people. Nobles lost a great deal of power both gradually and in violent revolutions, and the number of free people grew from just a few hundred nobles to thousands of people who weren't just born into the right family. Capitalism was born. And we can see how this new system works today. Under a capitalist society, your boss is part of this new group of free people. He, like the nobility of the previous economic era, has a lot of freedom to do what he wants, and a lot of the decisions he makes for himself trickle down and ultimately affect you. In the relationship between the
Right. Like, think about this too, like just recently, right? With in the United States at least, with the recession that's here, no one wants to admit it, but we're in a recession, right? Or at the start of one. With all the layoffs they're having in like the tech industry. Like how that's just decided by the bosses, right? And his board being like, well, we need to hit this number of profit. Even though like the profit number could be $1.2 billion. Right? They're like, well, we want 1.5. We need to do better than we did last year. You're talking about billions of dollars. Like, well, one way we can do that is if we cut, 1,000 jobs, right? And we could say, they'll always say it like this, like, we didn't want to do this, but we saw what was on the horizon, and we think this will be the best for both parties, right? But really, it's just because they want more in their paycheck, right? They want to have more freedom to do what they want.
The two of you, it's ultimately him that has the power. For example, your paycheck isn't determined by how good a job you do, but by what your boss decides it to be.
Right. And then the only reason it changes, or maybe it's better at other places, because their bosses are trying to compete with one another. Right? Like, I actually start a new job next Tuesday, okay? And what's probably the number one reason I'm leaving? I'm getting, like, X amount of money more, right? Most people do that, right? If you're offered to do maybe the same job or a similar job and you can get paid, let's say, $10,000 more, are you taking that? You're taking that, right? You're going to take that job. Even if you like your current job, right? Because that's, the competition. That's the market, right?
He has that freedom. Directly or indirectly, your boss hires and fires who he wants. You work for him and spend your days producing something that he can turn around and sell to someone else. This allows him to make a profit. Regardless of whether he's a nice guy or not, his profit calculation will demand that he take into account a few things, like how much he needs you and how many people out there are gunning for your job. The more those people are desperate, for example, because without your job they might end up homeless, the more he can push your wage down. The more homelessness or poverty there is, therefore, the better it is for him. Your salary isn't determined by how dedicated you are or how valuable what you do is, but by how disposable you can be.
I mean, I know this is stock footage, but this dude, like, he just has a vibe. He has a vibe that he, like, I'm not gonna lie, he's attractive, right? Like, but like, I have this, like, I get really bad social anxiety from one of the reasons I'm an anarchist is like, once again, going against domination and the hierarchies is like, I get so fucking nervous from like authority figures. Like I'm like, wow, this guy looks good, but also I don't want to piss him off. You know what I mean?
Valuable what you do is,
am I crazy?
But by how disposable you can be. You can get up.
Suit and ties, I don't know. It's also the suit and tie thing. Like, I'm just like, you're like in a different social status if you dress nice.
And protest him messing with your paycheck like this. But in the back of your mind, you know that if you push back too hard, you risk ending up with everyone else who is fighting to get your job. Under feudalism, people were made to work the noble's land and hand over the product of their labor. They had no choice and very little freedom to do otherwise. You work the land or you're going to be in a world of hurt. Now, you need to work the corporate, industrial, or service industry gig and hand over your time and whatever you produce while you're on the clock to the capitalist. In theory, you have the freedom not to work, or to work for whomever you want, as well as to negotiate with your employer. But in the same way serfs needed a place to live and food to put on their table, money from employment in the capitalist industry is necessary to live, and it's...
That's what I was saying earlier, right? That's a form of domination. I was going back to the domination thing, like, and that goes back to like why socialism to me is about also having freedom, like real freedom, right? That like I shouldn't have to sacrifice 40 hours, or for some people it's a lot more hours. I'm lucky I'm only have to do 40 hours a week, right? There's a lot of people who work a lot longer hours just so they can survive.
It's not like the power is balanced between the two of you. Not long ago, during the dawn of this new economic system, most workers had to hand over the majority of their life, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to their employers, often from a young age and in unspeakable conditions. We only very recently made this somewhat more bearable. The reason we haven't made even more improvements today is that capitalism did not actually represent much of a fundamental change from feudalism. The relationship of domination and coercion isn't all that different. It's just that this time, the size of the group with freedom is slightly bigger. A couple thousand instead of a couple hundred, and you don't necessarily have to be born into it. This system, for all its flaws, hasn't been all bad. In general, living standards have improved under capitalism for a lot of people. Capitalism is a net improvement, in some ways, from the society that preceded it. But just like feudal society became outdated, so too has capitalism. There have always been problems with this narrative of rising living standards, but recently, capitalism has started to fail even the people who once got a decent shake out of it. 2 or 3 generations ago, it was a no-brainer that a job could get you a house and enough money to support a family, pay your way through college, and get access to healthcare. You weren't exactly free, but you weren't doing too badly either. That is no longer true. The few people...
Once again, going back to like the 1950s US where, oh, those were the days, right? And it's, once again, it was just mostly white suburbanites. The dad went to work to his white collar job or wherever and came home, the wife made all the food for them and take care of the kids. They all have the same houses, you know. And like it's like a weird American nostalgia. Like it's so ingrained that we're like, oh, if we could just get back to that. We could just get back to that.
People at the top,
but it wasn't even that long. Like that only lasted like 10 years.
Have been given so much freedom to keep the money you made for them by working in their offices, at their storefronts, and in their factories that there isn't much left for you. High school and college graduates, once guaranteed stable employment and livable wages, are losing out.
Right. Like when so I'm born 95, right? So I went to college in 2013, going into 2014 there. And I just remember like, I'm not blaming my parents, right? I'm not blaming, anyone else's parents really. I'm blaming the society pressure, the capitalistic pressure, right? Capitalism forcing the standards to get a good job being higher, right? That like, hey, if you don't want to be doing retail, if you don't want to be doing blue collar jobs, like the really shitty ones, well, you have to go to college now. Like now is a requirement to have like a bachelor's. It used to be just a high school education. Now it's a bachelor's, and I can guarantee it. Probably in like maybe 20 years, if the way things are going, maybe it'll be a master's to get a job that like I got, right? And there's a lot of people who I know who went to the same school as me and probably did better in school than me, and I would say smarter than me, whatever. And some of them don't even have the jobs in the fields that they want to get into. Some of them are still living, at their parents, or had to go back to their hometown and do odd jobs, right? Like I feel like I'm really lucky where I'm at. There's a lot of people my age who graduate with me who aren't, doing what they want to do. There's always exceptions, obviously, but for the most part, yeah, like there's this expectation. You go to college now, you get at least a bachelor's, and then you have to work your way up from there, right?
Nowadays, between 40 and 50% of college grads are unemployed or working in a job that doesn't require a diploma, indebted at rates that completely overshadow their salaries.
Because then you have all the people who were doing those retail and those kind of jobs, right? The like he's saying, the degree required jobs. Since everyone's getting degrees now, someone still has to do the non-degree jobs, right? And there's nothing wrong with non-degree jobs, obviously. Like, capitalism makes us a competition, being like, well, my job's better than that, right? There's some people who might be chill being a garbage man, for example. But once again, it's I need to find a job that pays well, needs to have good benefits, blah, 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 blah.
And the story's the same across the economy. For someone working at Amazon to make as much money as Jeff Bezos does in just 1 year, they would have to work for 58 years. And that's just with his salary. If we start counting dividends, you'd be working every day of every year of multiple lifetimes just to catch up to Bezos' single lap around the sun. Clearly,
Crazy.
It's time for an upgrade. Socialists look at this march of history and ask 2 questions. 1, is there a better way to get the same results as produced under capitalism? And 2, what is it? In other words, how do we keep the parts we like from capitalism, rising living standards, and cut out the parts we don't like, the exploitation, imbalances of power, and massively uneven distribution of those rising living standards? The big answer for socialists lies in who owns things like companies. The argument goes that so long as there is just one, or at the most a few people who own our society's productive enterprises, they will be able to make decisions that benefit them and not us. Your boss, because he has been given the freedom to do so, will use his power to curtail yours. He will always try to push your wages down as low as possible, make you work the longest hours you can, make your working conditions as dire as possible, because it's cheaper that way and rakes in more money for him and the other people who own the company. While he has to balance that with what other capitalists will do and try to offer better conditions, hours, or wages, every step he makes in the right direction has to contend with his profit margins. If something is unprofitable, even just by a fraction of a % less, he can't do it. He can't risk some other company being more ruthless than he is and undercutting his business. The only choices that are on the table are the ones that make him wealthier, even if that means making you poorer or generally worse off in the process.
Yep.
Socialists take stock of all these incentives and try to understand how we can change them. Instead of the most important thing being the capitalist profit, how can we incentivize things that benefit all of us, putting more options on the table than just the ones that make the guy at the top richer? And we have a lot of ideas on how we can do this, from central planning, to free association between communes, to worker-owned cooperatives, to cybernetic management. However varied these ideas are, and truly there are a lot of them, they are all united by the same conclusion: that the best way to figure out which ideas benefit everybody to the fullest extent is to let people decide for themselves.
Boom. Boom. That's what I've been trying to say. I hope that's registered. Boom. That there's many different ideas of like how to do socialism, right? But at the end of the day, like, we're all on the same team of trying to be like, hey, let's decide for ourselves. That's one of the reasons I'm more of an anarchist, like I said, is because I really do believe in that. And that there's not going to be a black and white one-fits-all thing, right? Hell yeah.
Give everybody control over what ideas we want to see happen and how. Instead of a few people at the top setting the rules of the game,
LOL, Nancy.
everybody should get a say over things like their working conditions.
Whoop. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to...
A few people
I'm
at
just
the
gonna
top
hold this
setting
frame.
the rules of the game, everybody should get a say
I'm just going to hold this frame for no particular reason.
over things like their working conditions. Control over what gets done and how, for everyone, by everyone. Not by some self-appointed class of millionaires and billionaires who get to boss everyone else around. And you intuitively know that this works. How many times has your boss made a decision you know is in the wrong, but you're the one who has to live with it? How many times have you been told that there's just not enough in the budget for a raise, or for you to take that day off, but the company is raking in record profits? How many decisions are kept behind closed doors until they blow up in your face? You might not always have the answers to every problem your company faces, but if the solutions of those at the top are so good, why are their decisions made behind closed doors? Why do they always make them better off and not you? Socialists understand that this isn't a system that makes anybody more free or makes things any more fair. Freedom is a two-way street. I can't be free to do what I want if you have the freedom to stop me from doing it. I can't be free if you make all my decisions for me. By all means, when something only affects you, you should be able to do what you please. But if things like my livelihood get involved, it's only fair that we all get a say. And it's becoming clearer to more people growing up today that their odds of living a decent life aren't as secure as they have been in the past. It's going to come down to a lot of luck whether you end up doing well for yourself and living what we might consider a normal life, even if you work really hard. But even though we see how our current capitalist society is leading us down this unfortunate path, curtailing our freedom, or more generally, how the system benefits from things like high unemployment, poverty, and low wages, it can feel scary or even just hasty to jump to socialism for the answer. We can recognize the flawed incentives and inherent economic instability of capitalism and still not know what to do about it. The historical record, after all, hasn't really proved that an alternative system works either. At least, that's what we've been told. But contrary to what is commonly believed, the performance of developing countries in the period of state-led development was superior to what they've achieved during the subsequent period of market-oriented reform. There were some spectacular failures of state intervention, but most of these countries grew much faster, with more equitable income distribution and far fewer economic crises during the bad old days than they have done in the period of market-oriented reforms. Moreover, it is also not true that almost all rich countries have become rich through free market policies. The truth is more or less the opposite. With only a few exceptions, all of today's rich countries, including Britain and the US, the supposed homes of free trade and free market, have become rich through the combinations of protectionism, subsidies, and other policies that today they advise developing countries not to adopt.
Why is that? Why would they tell other countries not to adopt the things that they did to get to where they are? Wonder why that is.
Free market policies have made few countries rich so far and will make few rich in the future. That's a quote from economist Ha-Joon Chang in his book 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. There's more interesting stuff in there, and it's a pretty casual read if you're interested. And he's not even a socialist, so you don't have to worry about consuming commie propaganda or anything. He's just honest about the shortcomings of capitalism. So what does this mean? Is socialism just when the government does stuff? The answer is no. For starters, that question implies a lot of really horrible things. You think the DMV sucks? Just wait until the government takes over everything else. You think the government is screwing you now? Just wait until they have even more power. Obviously, a world of DMVs as dictators isn't what socialists want. Who in their right mind would defend something like that? Part of the problem is that that question is being asked in a pretty deceitful way. What counts as the government doing stuff? Sometimes government programs are measures for wealth redistribution, like Social Security, welfare, public libraries, and food stamps. Other times it's basic stuff that every government, regardless of its economic model or ideology, takes care of. Things like fire departments, garbage removal, sewers, or streetlights. In this list are also institutions like the police, the military, the FBI and CIA, courts, and prisons. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, there are going to be things on this list that you don't like and other things that you do. When you imply that socialism is when the government does stuff, and you're already primed to be wary of the word, your mind easily jumps to whatever thing the government does that you don't like, or that the present government does the worst, hence the DMV and authoritarian stuff. But regardless, that's not what socialism is. Socialism is a society in which the means of production, factories, farms, offices, basically the things that produce for the economy, are held by all in common and subject to democratic decision-making, rather than that of a few individuals. Nothing more.
So yeah, with the definitions again, going back to like this, like I said, it's kind of like the OG one. More of an economic definition, right?
Governments are one way to coordinate this ownership. It's not the only one. What's more, there's a deeper problem with this question. The way we think of government isn't absolute, empty of all context. As humans, we have a hard time imagining a world that isn't like the one we have now, which means we also have a hard time imagining how our governments could be different from the way they exist today, under capitalism. And you already know what that's like. Companies pumping in billions to get some guy elected and in their pocket. Public services working on razor-thin budgets and being genuinely infuriating. The people you cast a ballot for not doing their jobs and getting paid quite a lot to pretend it's not their fault. Every election going to the lesser evil. The default vision of government we all inherit is one of incompetence, unresponsiveness, corruption, and elitism. It benefits a select class of 1%ers and only tosses a few crumbs to the rest of us. The main promise that socialists have to keep is that we can turn this all on its head. That we can truly arrive at democracy, one that isn't awful and out of touch, by directly involving people in the democratic process at their job and stripping all the power away from the billionaires that sit at the helm of massive corporations with the power to lobby democracy away. That we can coordinate, through planning or otherwise, the production of things in such a way that we are producing according to our needs and desires, not for the profit of a select few. Profit-driven markets sometimes get this right, in all fairness, broken clock and all that, but are still very often terrible at delivering on our wants and needs. Hence why housing is so unaffordable for most people. Why homelessness is...
Yeah, I'm never gonna buy a house. And I make decent money for my age and in our situation. Like I said, I'm very, very fortunate and lucky, I feel like, compared to a lot of other people I know. And I'm still I can't afford a house. I'm just gonna have to rent forever.
Is always so high, why education is out of reach for millions, and why healthcare costs continue to skyrocket.
Or if I buy a house, it's gonna be 3 hours away from my workplace, because that's gonna be in the middle of nowhere.
The demand is there. Capitalism is terrible at providing the supply. The mission set out by socialists is to deliver on the promises of capitalism that capitalism can't actually provide. To give you and your loved ones the security, the stability, and the good life that you deserve, and that is within our means to provide to all, were it not for a few leeches taking advantage of their undue power and getting in the way
leeches,
of everyone getting a livable baseline to build upon.
Parasites.
In short, no. Socialism is not when the government does stuff. You get to decide what gets done. You participate more directly than before in the decisions that affect your day-to-day life. Socialists aren't against competition. We're also big fans of innovation, but we don't want to see competition and innovation being used as excuses to push most people towards poverty and make the lucky remaining few ludicrously wealthy. Still, this all sounds well and good in theory, but socialism doesn't work in practice, right? And here we have to pause for a second and understand that socialism, like capitalism, exists on a continuum of policies and ideas. There is no fully capitalist experiment, just like there is no fully socialist experiment. Saying socialism doesn't work is as wrong-headed as saying capitalism doesn't work. More generally, though, it's not like there's a good experimental method to base that conclusion off of. It's not like...
Capitalism doesn't work, though. I don't know if I agree with that. Because I think there's been enough of time that has passed to see that capitalism doesn't work. Just even the last 5 years alone. I think this video came out... When did this video come out? 10 months ago. So, I mean, I kind of disagree with that, but...
Like we can take two countries, control for all their differences, and let them run loose with each economic model. No two countries are the same, start off from the same point, or exist in a vacuum. We can't compare country A to country B and call it a day. Socialist experiments often happened in countries that were poorer to start off with, and generally speaking had to contend with a global economy managed by capitalist adversaries. If this were a scientific experiment, it wouldn't get published. That being said, we can look to the archives of countries that have experimented with mostly socialist economics and see how successful they were, despite the circumstances. One place we might look is Salvador Allende's socialist Chile. Allende was a socialist who won the Chilean presidential election of 1970. In his few short years as president, and we'll get to why they were so short in just a minute, Allende brought incredible changes to Chilean society. He raised wages. Real wages increased by around 22% in the first full year of his presidency. He lowered taxes. 35% of Chileans were no longer taxed at all. He reined in inflation, lowering it by over 10 points. He funded massive housing programs, building tens of thousands of affordable homes all across the country. Education also got a big boost, and enrollment at all educational levels grew. Universities in particular were made free, increasing enrollment by nearly 90%. Hospitals and other medical centers were opened across the country, particularly in underserved, rural, and poor areas. Allende extended maternity leave, doubling it from 6 to 12 weeks. Chile saw a dramatic decrease in poverty, and generally speaking, more people could more fully enjoy their lives. And
this was only in, how many years?
Interestingly enough, the bulk of this new economy was organized through Project Cybersign, a decentralized network of computers that would take anonymous, self-reported, and voluntary updates from workers in productive enterprises across Chile to identify areas where resources needed to be redirected. The Democratic...
This is like an exit interview, or like HR, how it should work at jobs, instead of just, you say that, they're like, oh, well, we can't do that. we can't make that
Chile
change.
Was highly responsive to fluctuating changes, and Chileans reaped the rewards. GDP grew 7% in the first year, production by 13%, and consumption by 11%. By kicking out capitalist enterprises, not only did the Chilean economy work for more people, it worked better, period. This kind of response wasn't welcomed by everyone, though. Allow me to pull quotes from a particular document, the Church Commission Report on Chile, one of the only documents released by the American government to the public about the extent of its intelligence agency's intervention in a foreign country. These are all things the US is actually admitting to. Covert American activity was a factor in almost every major election in Chile in the decade between 1963 and 1973. In several instances, the United States intervention was massive. The 1964 presidential election was the most prominent example of a large-scale election project. The Central Intelligence Agency spent more than $2.6 million, $24 million in today's dollars, in support of the election of the opposition. More than half of the Christian Democratic candidate's campaign was financed by the United States. The most extensive covert action activity in Chile was propaganda. It was relatively cheap. In addition to buying propaganda piecemeal, the station often purchased it wholesale by subsidizing Chilean media organizations friendly to the United States. The CIA supported or even founded friendly media outlets which might not have existed in the absence of agency support. The United States' covert efforts to affect the course of Chilean politics reached a peak in 1970. The CIA was directed to undertake an effort to promote a military coup in Chile to prevent the accession to power of Salvador Allende. In summary, the White House, intelligence community, multinational corporations, and military wasted millions trying to stop a popular candidate getting elected in a democratic election, and when it failed, wasted another set of millions trying to depose the guy who had improved Chile by nearly every metric. Their first coup attempt in 1970 would fail, but 3 years later, the US efforts would succeed. Allende was ousted as president, opting to take his own life rather than be captured when the Chilean army, hopped up on CIA money, took over the presidential building. What followed was a new era of American puppet government that imprisoned, tortured, and killed hundreds of thousands of people. And Allende's story isn't particularly unique. There are echoes of this story all around the world, everywhere socialist alternatives started doing a little too well. We don't have a magic button to rewind the clock and try this again. We can't for sure know if things would have happened differently if by some accident of history, socialism had become our global economic model all those years ago when capitalism was born. But we can still try to imagine what we can do from this point forward. There's no doubt that this video won't have answered all your questions. Imagining a different world is a tedious thing to do, and there are a lot of concerns to be addressed. And it's also usually easier to ask questions about something in the future than turn around and ask those same questions about the system we have right now. If we were as critical with our present society as we are with that of the future, would we still choose it? In any case, I've put a link below to a short pamphlet put together by Verso and Jacobin magazine.
Heard good things about this book.
Most questions people have when first encountering socialist theory are answered in a few short conversational pages. There's answers to questions about human nature, property, authoritarianism, laziness, and other things that are typically concerning, answered in a fair way by people who believe in a socialist future. I'm one of those people who believes that a better world is possible. You've probably seen absurd caricatures of socialists on TV. The Red Scare never really went away. But I hope this video helps to show that we're pretty normal people. We just think that what we have right now isn't working, and it's time to make a change. This video was intended for a slightly different audience than usual.
Here's the
link
link
again. If you're a
again.
long-time subscriber, I know this one was probably a little simple. But the point is for you guys to send this to your friends and family who may not really understand
Send it
what
to your friends and
socialism is all
family.
about. Maybe it can spark some useful conversations. If you've stuck around till the end, I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video,
Give it a like too.
YouTube has really been screwing me lately. My AdSense revenue completely tanked out of nowhere, and subscribers have been reporting not getting notified. If you'd like to help keep the channel afloat, remember to click the bell to force notifications, and maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Even if you just chip in $1 a month, you get all the perks. Early access to every video, and access to our patrons-only Discord server.
Yeah, so if you like
Discord
this,
is a
yeah,
really
definitely
cool
go drop
place.
them $1.
We've got
You know what I
a
mean?
book club, a reading list, and I try to do a live Q&A every month. My patrons are literally the only thing keeping this.
This is a very
operation
solid
running,
video.
and I appreciate.
I remember
each
watching
and
it
every one of you.
before, but I didn't
Okay,
remember every
that's all
aspect
I've got.
of it.
I'm gonna go not be on camera anymore. That was really hard. It's been a long time since I've been on camera. Let me know what you thought of the different format in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of good videos. We'll probably watch another one at some point when we get to other subjects, because they do a lot of different stuff. So, yeah, good shit. Good shit. That was our first video. I have one other video. It's a lot shorter than this one, if I remember correctly. And then we'll be calling it. But, yeah, great vid. I feel like it kind of sums up some chunks of what we were talking about today. Then expand on some other things. And then give an example of, how once again the U.S. and will always try to interfere and won't allow socialism to possibly be attempted. And this shit still happens today. Don't make that mistake that like, oh, the U.S. was just scared in the 70s. They still do this shit today. Whether it's because of socialism or because there's some sort of economic interest, right? The next video is Richard Wolff, who talks about 3 kinds of socialism. 11 minutes. And this was Democracy at Work. Here is the link. Feel free to open it on your end and then mute it, and you can watch along with me. We can still have it running in the background, and then we'll give them an extra view, or give them a real view.
Program to going over with you the 3 major ways this idea of socialism is understood. Because those ways are relevant today. Those ways are fighting it out amongst themselves in terms of the allegiance and feelings and thoughts of people around the world. And they're going to shape our future. So here's the first one. In this view, socialism has to do with the government. That's right. The government is to come in and regulate, control a private capitalist economy. That's right. An economy governed by private enterprises owned by private citizens who trade with one another in an institution called the market, where they buy and sell their labor, their work, their products, their services. That's right. It's a capitalist economy, private enterprise, markets, but one in which the government is brought in. Some people mean socialism by that. And they mean particularly that the government is brought in a certain way. Number 1, the government is to regulate what the private enterprises do so that they are less self-serving, profit-oriented, and are more socially concerned. That's why minimum wage is something socialists always supported. Many of them want there to be limits on how much prices can be raised by corporations or how much profits can be earned by them. And the second reason socialists want the government to come in is to redistribute wealth, because capitalism has this tendency to concentrate wealth in very few hands and deprive the mass of people. So the socialists want the government to come in using taxes and using government spending to do a bit of redistribution, to equalize a system that turns unequal very quickly.
Yeah, I triple checked. Yeah, Richard Wolff's an American economist, but he's more on the left-leaning end, very influenced by like Marx and whatnot.
So for these people, socialism means that the government comes in, regulates and taxes to make what we might call capitalism, because it leaves business in the hands of private enterprises and markets, but we could call it capitalism with a humane face, capitalism with a certain welfare focus, the welfare of all the people. And here,
that's what we were talking about earlier at the very beginning, right? That I think this is a lot of what Americans view it as, or a lot more maybe right-leaning Americans view it as. Like I said, I don't personally think that this is like really a correct definition, but it is a belief, right?
here are some examples. Denmark, Norway, Germany, Italy, France. Those countries are often referred to as socialist. Their governments are often governments of socialist parties, and that's what those parties mean, that they will have the government do this regulating and redistributing. That's one concept of socialism around the world. It's pretty close to what Bernie Sanders means in the United States, or what Jeremy Corbyn means in Great Britain. But here's the second one. In the second view, this first one doesn't go far enough, Because, yes, the government comes in and controls things and redistributes, but it's in a perpetual war, which the government often loses with those very private enterprises who try to get around the government regulation, who try to get around the government taxation. We're all familiar with those examples of companies, for example, Amazon, which has earned billions in profits the last 2 years and paid absolutely no taxes to the United States government. Indeed, this last year, they're getting a refund in excess of $100 million. So we know that private corporations do everything in their power to use their profits, to use their political power, to undo, to evade all of those socialistic regulations and redistributions. And this has led some socialists to say you have to go further. It isn't enough to regulate and redistribute. The government should, here we go, directly take over the enterprises.
Here we go.
There shouldn't be private enterprises because those will always be run for the profit of the private owner. If you want the economy to serve everybody, then the agent of everybody, the government, that we all elect, at least in theory, should take over and run the businesses so they behave in the way that's good for everybody, and there isn't this perpetual war between a regulating government and private enterprise. And the same argument says we shouldn't allow the market to decide who gets what, because a market always delivers whatever is scarce to the people with the most money. It's an institution for those who are rich and who stay that way by using the market. So these socialists go further. The government should take over enterprises, literally own and operate the factories, stores, and offices, and instead of the market deciding who gets what, it should be planned in terms of what we want for the society as a whole. These kinds of socialists, after the 1920s, took the name communists to signal that they went further than the other socialists in order to take over, through the government, the apparatus of the economy. So some people mean by socialism government regulating a private capitalism to make it more humane.
That's more of like the social democrat again, right? I was talking about that earlier. Social democrat, or even to a degree, democratic socialism has also been used to describe that, where you're not necessarily anti-capitalist, you're anti just, making capitalism, or you're pro, rather, making capitalism more quote unquote fair, right? That, no billionaires, right? Not abolishing your bosses, you know what I mean? And that's what he's talking about.
To make it less unequal? And other people say, no, socialism means, for them, that the government takes over the enterprise and plans the distribution of output rather than leaving it to the market. And this second group of socialists often, not always, but often takes the name communist to show how they're different from the first group. And in those kinds of examples, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, and for parts of their history, Cuba, Vietnam, and so on, are examples. Now let's get to the third kind of socialism that's contesting in the world today. To become the important kind, to become the kind believed in and followed by most people, to win your interest as well. And this approach is in a way an evolution out of the other two. It's a kind of critical evolution because it is advanced by people who see some merits in the first kind of socialism, government regulation, the second kind, government operating enterprises, but say we don't think that's enough in one way and it's too much in the other. Here's how it's not enough. It's not enough because it doesn't change the workplace, the place where the mass of people do their economic thing, using their brains and muscles to transform objects into the goods and services we all need to live the lives we want to live. It doesn't change it enough. Meanwhile, it does something too much. It gives too much power to the government. as a government that has this much power to regulate and redistribute, let alone a government that takes over owning and operating, is a government that runs us the risk that it'll do a lot more than these economic things, using its power for political or cultural controls of a society that we have seen and we don't want again. Well, then these kinds of socialists have a new focus. For them, what will really make a difference, what will take us beyond capitalism and be a better way of organizing society, focuses on the enterprise, the workplace. And it goes like this. We have the economic system we have, with its good points and its bad points, in large part because we don't allow democracy into the workplace. And these socialists say capitalism never did that. Capitalism is a hierarchical way of organizing an enterprise. A few people, the owner, the shareholders who have the big blocks of shares, they run capitalist enterprises. The mass of us have no control at all, and they run it for them. And the way to change society to make it better is to have the people who work in an enterprise, all of them, one person, one vote, have democratic control of the workplace as just as important as having democratic control of the community in which you live, the neighborhood in which you exist, and
I could be wrong with this, but it's kind of what like workers' councils are a bit like how we were talking about briefly earlier, where like in Hungary, where they're not just, but it's more than just the workplace. It's like they're like when you're voting, when they're voting for like the other things like he was mentioning, like in your elections, you're also voting at your workplace as well. So it's like I said, it's more cohesive together. That like it's it's as a society, it's also talking about your workplace. You know what I mean? It's that combination.
So on. This kind of socialism is micro-focused. It says, let's not talk only about the government and private enterprise. We don't mind private enterprise. The government doesn't have to control everything. There has to be some coordination. But the big issue for us, say these socialists, is the transformation of the workplace, the socialization of the workplace, so it becomes a community run democratically rather than something run by a small number of people who put their benefits, the so-called bottom line, as profits for them rather than a good life for everybody. Okay, those kinds of socialism are arguing with one another for your attention and your allegiance.
You gotta pick
one. To be
one.
interested in socialism doesn't mean you're necessarily the believer of one or the other. Most real socialist societies have mingled the control function of government with the ownership function of government. What most experiments have not done is really tried that other kind of socialism that revolutionizes the workplace, brings democracy to the workplace for the first time, and says that's the way to get beyond the limits of capitalism. Its inequalities, its instabilities, its injustices. So the question that's being fought out is not the question capitalism versus socialism, or at least it's not only that. It's also a struggle going on among these different definitions and meanings of socialism that are just as important to what's going on as the so-called struggle between capitalism and socialism that was so crucial in the last 100 years.
And like I said, this is just 3 that he shared. Like I said, we how many have we read today? It feels like there's so many other ones, right? But I really like that video because it's just 3 ones that he's talking about, and I feel like that's just the surface, right? That's just the surface level of different type of socialism, both historically and recently. When did this video come out again? Let's see. Yeah, 3 years ago. 3 years ago. So, and I feel like it's changed in 3 years, at least for me, right? Or at least the knowledge being available. But yeah, that was the last video. I'll link it one more time so you can go watch it at your leisure. if you want, and at least give it a like and whatnot. Make sure to give it myself. Yeah, that was the last video, and that's really all I had for today. I feel like I said, this was these first couple that I written up here. This is session 1, socialism. I have 2 other ones that I've written up. Still not sure if those are going to be the next 2, because I feel like this first topic was a lot more broad, and the other one's a little bit more specific. But we'll see. But overall, I feel pretty happy with how this kind of shaped. We're about to hit the 3-hour mark, 5 minutes before 3 hours here. So that was kind of my goal, was to hit at least an hour. And I'm like, if I can get 2 hours, I feel like that means I have a good structure. But I'm always open to folks' maybe ideas that they have for this. Like maybe I should add a certain section, or hey, maybe the fun section should be at the end because it kind of like maybe deviates from what we were just talking about. Or maybe I have to find more good news / fun things that tie in more into what we're talking about. Or maybe, I don't know, I kind of liked it. Kind of like taking that break where we did a lot of like definition. What does it mean for like the first 30 to 45 minutes, and then did that fun part for the next 30. Then jump back into some reading and then watching some videos to kind of keep it chill at the end there. But yeah, this was I feel like a good first session. But yeah, feel free to, I'm hoping to upload this on YouTube, so if you're watching it on YouTube, feel free to drop comments below of some feedback, or maybe things you liked, or maybe things I could change for the future or add. If there's a topic that maybe we should cover, I will take that too. But yeah, it was a really good first episode. I feel like very happy with how it came out, because I was very nervous about it. I've been nervous about it for ever. When I've like told myself a year ago, I'm like, I need to do this at some point. And I wasn't sure how it was going to shape out, and I still think it's going to evolve into something else, and potentially. But I don't want to commit to anything, because I've definitely started projects in the past that I've done maybe a handful of times, maybe less, and then I don't do them again. But I'm hoping after the success of this one, I feel like to keep going, at least do the other 2 that I have mocked up. But some of the topics that I've thought about doing are, we did socialism. I would really like to do maybe like specific historical events, like I said, the Paris Commune, like what was that, and like what learn more about that. Or another subject I've always been interested in is like Occupy Wall Street, because that was around 2008, when I was still kind of young, but starting to get into politics a little bit, or at least pay attention more. I really still don't know too much about it. I have a general idea of it. Whoops, hit my mic. Sorry about that. But yeah, like stuff like that. But I also have other ideas. Like one of them is dual power. It's kind of a newer thing that's come out in the last couple years. Praxis, like what is praxis as a socialist concept, a anti-capitalist concept, or how you're using your anti-capitalism as practice. That might be the next episode or session rather. But yeah, maybe this. I know I've done like some other political streams here and there in the past. Like I know I did one for some of the presidential debates. Those are fun. I might do those again in the future. I know I've also just stopped streaming a lot. I've only been doing the Sock Gang CSGO streams. I don't know when the next one will be of this. Like I said, it took me a year to really like flesh out what I wanted to do. But if this structure works, I feel like it's more of just doing the extra homework and finding the things to fit into each subject. And there might be some subjects that are easier to find stuff on than others. But yeah, let me know what you think. I really appreciate everyone tuning in and watching live on twitch.tv/CursonaFun here. Appreciate the couple people who followed, who chatted. And if you lurked, that's cool too. But yeah, let me know what you think. And yeah, I think that'll be it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.